Hello, welcome back to the Live Rally Games podcast. My name is Steven Stewart, and I'm here today with more Surviving Reelfoot, unfinished business, postseason content. And what better way than to spend the time talking with the winner, the one and only Austin. Austin, how are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. It's great to see you again. We've come a long way since the good old pirate survival expedition days with a familiar outcome.
So, fun fact, I met Austin back in 2017 when we both played Pirate Survival Expedition in Macomb, Illinois, and we both made Final Tribal Council, and I was I lost, but Austin played a very good game and a very familiar game from when I was watching Reelfoot this season. It felt.
Yeah, no, I think there's definitely some similarities throughout the game where at different points I was like, oh, like, this seems oddly familiar. Like I kind of know how to navigate this situation.
I mean, when you look at our Pirate Survival game, there's a lot of Reelfoot alumni in that game. Could you maybe call that like unfinished business 0.5, like in preparation for the true unfinished business?
I mean, some people like, I don't know. At that point, I feel like I didn't really know as many. I didn't know most of those people that were playing at that point. Mm-hmm. So I think it was really just Jessica, Lance, Pete, and a little bit of Joel that I knew. Pete, obviously, Pete. Thank you to Pete for bringing me to Pirate that year. It was Blood vs. Water, and Pete's godson had to drop out, and he asked me if I would be his blood partner for the game, and he's still to this day, he thinks that he should have a shirt like mine because he brought the winner. So shout out to you, Pete. maybe for Christmas we'll get you a shirt that says you brought the winner.
So that was also the summer that you played your first Reelfoot season, right? Wilson Hill?
It was. I played Reelfoot about a month before Pirate, month and a half before we played Pirate together. Mm-hmm. Finished 8th place and was able to turn it around a month later.
So what was your Wilson Hill experience like for you?
I think that Wilson Hill was just kind of surreal. It was my first first LRG for me. I think I'd really only played like one, maybe two, but I think really only one at that point. And that's where I met Pete. He kind of helped get me into Reelfoot. I remember Pete telling me that there were some people in casting that, weren't really the biggest fans of putting me on the cast, but Pete stuck up for me and fought for me. So he got me in that first season, got me in my first game that I won. So, I love
Pete's your man.
So, yeah, Pete's my boy. Frank said it yesterday that Pete's got like a top 3 and I'm in it. And I like to think I'm number 1 in it, but we'll leave that to Pete to tell.
So, I mean, that was a wild summer because you play your first game ever, you get 8th place, which is good. But you're not winning, and then you turn around a month later, you play Pirate Survival, and you win. And then I think the next game you played was Survival Challenge in 2021, right? Or is it 2019? 2019, okay.
2019.
Yeah, and then
kind of flop there.
Survival Challenge is a whole different beast. So
yes, that it is. We can that's a story for another podcast.
Yeah. Well, Dirt, you have a whole podcast on that story too, which I can link in the
I do have a
minutes afterwards. and then a couple years later, here you are at Reelfoot Unfinished Business.
Yes, finally, after 6 years since my first Reelfoot, finally got brought back. 4 years since the last time I played a game, so it was wonderful to be back.
So I have to ask, what is or was your Reelfoot Unfinished Business coming into the season?
For me it was weird because we get to the map when they're about to put us in our tribes and they tell us what the theme of the season is, unfinished business. And for me, going into it, I could care less what they called it. Just Surviving Reelfoot 11, like the new school era does, for all I care. For me, it was just all about coming back and winning. Never really thought about unfinished business. I think it was until the merge at some point. Tony or someone, I believe it was Tony, he's like, oh, awesome. Like, what's your unfinished business? And I was just kind of like, I don't know. It's like to win. But I mean, obviously, when you look at it, everyone that was back had never won before, or hadn't won Reelfoot before, I should say. So for me, that kind of, I thought about it and I was just like, I didn't win any challenges, so that was something I really wanted to do. Obviously, wanted to beat my placement like everybody. Um, and for me, I think by the end of the game, I kind of realized I had done these changes without kind of even realizing it. It was just kind of changing the way that I played the game, being more confident.
Mhm.
Sticking up for myself even when things weren't going my way. Keeping my nose to the grind and finding
Mhm.
different paths to get to the end. So I think really for me that was the unfinished business. Something I didn't do in Survive either. I made a lot of mistakes there. So really just trying to come in, be focused. I think a lot of it. I have a lot of like, I don't know the right word, very upset with the way I played in Survival Challenge.
Mhm.
I went into that feeling like I had to prove a point, so I was hired 2 years before, and it was okay. Like this is me validating that I am a good winner. Um, but I was also like very paranoid going into that game, like unsure of myself.
Mhm.
I don't know. It was just weird going into Survival Challenge for me. So coming into this game, I just tried to relax, not overstress. And then, like obviously, we found out the cast a couple of days beforehand. So when I saw the cast, I was like, oh, like this is going to be an interesting group to play with.
Mhm.
There was a little trepidation when I first saw some of the people that were playing. Um, but just came in and said, come in, have fun, play a little bit of a stronger game, and however the cards fall, I'm going to be happy with it because I'm going to just play a little bit more of a selfish game to an extent this
Mhm.
time, which is something I hadn't really done before. So yeah, I feel like looking back at it coming into the game, that was my unfinished business, but I just didn't really think about it when they told us the theme.
So 2 comments I want to highlight. One is for Pete. Pete says that your unfinished business was the showing your growth to the Reelfoot family. So Pete's got your back with the answer there. And then Brady has a question as well. Brady's question is, from your season 4 game of Reelfoot to this season, what do you think was the biggest contrast in the ways you played?
I mean, I think kind of what I was saying, just being more confident, thinking about myself long term in the game, um, making those moves and not just following the group the whole time, being a good soldier. That's what I did my first time around, and it kind of led to me getting voted out. I had a good, solid alliance. We were working together. We had one individual in that alliance who was fairly paranoid about somebody else and really wanted them out. We attempted to vote that person out of one tribal. Uh, and then the next tribal, I really pushed the vote. Cool. Out the very next round because it was all Boston's playing too hard of a game. When really I was just trying to take care of an alliance member, assure them that they were good.
Mhm.
So for me, it was just coming in, focusing on myself, getting myself to the end. I mean, I had some great allies along the way that helped me get there. But some of those allies were relationships that I formed later on in the game that I didn't do in for. So really just focusing on the game, how to get to the end, playing selfish, making those decisions that I probably wouldn't have back and forth. If there was someone I wanted to work with, like a Sharif, and just trying to figure out, I would have just constantly tried to figure out a way to make things work together. And I think if I had done that this season, I probably would have gone out in a similar placement, if not earlier than I did last time.
Mhm. So, what did you do anything in preparation of coming into this Reelfoot season?
Not at all, not a bit. I mean, the physicality, whatever, just being in the elements outdoors. I mean, my job prepares me for that on a daily basis. I mean, everyone knows that I'm a mascot. I've been doing it for about 10 years now in Florida and Texas, in baseball during the summer. So I'm always outside. So, I mean, in a mascot suit, it's 30 to 40 degrees hotter in the suit than it is outside. So, like tomorrow, it's supposed to be like 105. So, looking at 135, 140 in the suit, something like that.
That'd be a
So
lot.
the elements of the game don't really bother me.
Mhm.
I was hoping for some more rain. I know people probably think I'm crazy for that. I've never really played in a game that had a lot of rain or any rain really.
Hey, no,
Um,
it rained on us in our season.
Yeah, like at the merge for while we
Yeah.
were eating, but it was terrible. So like the one that when it rained on day 1 or 2, like I didn't bring a poncho, I didn't bring anything, I didn't care. It literally rained. Everyone on the Coney was in their ponchos sitting under the shelter, and that armrest that Frank had. I literally just sat in it, like just let my hair down, sat in it. And I was like, I want like Survivor experience, like fucking dump on me, like I want it. Come on, Rain. So that was. I didn't really do much preparation. Again, I feel like when I went into Survival Challenge, I kind of psyched myself out a little bit.
Mhm.
So I really tried not to do that. Just wanted to come in, focus on making some relationships, and so if people didn't know, kind of met in person, um, and just play my game, but just make those little tweaks and changes. So that's prepared.
One fun parallel is I also felt very unsatisfied with my survival challenge experience, that also really colored when I went and came in and played Reelfoot. It really was like in reaction to that survival challenge experience. So I can really emphasize that. This season was very heavy from seasons 8, 9, 10. From your original season, there was only one other player, Reynolds. Talk to me about your experience with Reynolds in season 4, and your thoughts seeing he was the only other player coming into the season with you.
Yeah, so I mean, coming into the season, obviously knowing that it's all returnees, I highly suspected that Reynolds would be there and probably nobody else from 4, just because I think myself, Reynolds, and like 3 others are like the only people from 4 who hadn't played twice. So yeah, so I've very much expected to see Reynolds here. Seeing that it was that heavy of 8, 9, and 10 was kind of like, oh wow, this is not exactly what I was expecting. I think Reynolds was the first person I messaged when they told us to cast, and I was like, I was like, I think this is like a winners at war. Hopefully, it's not like an old school versus new school in Reelfoot, because they're kind of screwed on those numbers. But I was production for 5, 6, 7, and 8. For 8, I think I was only there for the last half of the week, just because of work stuff. So I didn't really get to know that many people that well from that season. And then 9 and 10, obviously I wasn't there at all, so I didn't know any of these people. It was hard for me to watch 9 and 10 just because work. We had games both seasons for 9 and 10, so I would usually kind of tune in at tribal councils and just kind of see who was voting people out, just kind of going from there, trying to follow in the Facebook group chats that were going on to know kind of who was in charge of the game, who had idols and things like that. But never really got to see any of those people's games, confessionals that well. So for me, when I saw especially the 9 and 10, I was like, oh wow, I was like, this could be bad for me. I was like, now I'm really mad I wasn't on Broad these last 2 years. But then the more, I kind of sat back and went, okay, don't psych yourself out like you did for Survival Challenge. The way I looked at it was, okay, well, you do have the benefit that I know I'm a good social player. I know I'm usually a pretty likable person in general. I can usually find common ground with people on something to bond over. And these people from 9 and 10, they don't know. So they're not going to automatically be like, oh, I want to work with Austin. Frank was kind of talking about it last night, that I was like a mystery, a wild card, probably is how a lot of those people viewed me. So I was like, okay, if I go in, just be myself, I'm going to make those connections, some good relationships. And I think I'll be fine. So I think that really helped. And then also, as I drove going to, I met Skylar for like 30 minutes before season 9. Her and Jeff stopped here in Amarillo when they were driving out there to have lunch. I didn't even know Jeff was bringing Skylar at that time. I thought just me and Jeff were going to lunch, and we'd pull up at the restaurant, and this girl gets out of the car, and I was like, oh, like, who's this? He introduced us, and yeah, so I loved Skylar, getting to meet her. So I was excited that I knew at least one person from that, but just not very well. But yeah, so it was just kind of, I was saying, I was driving to the game this season, and I called some of my like really close friends, Becca and Sam McNair from my season of Survival Challenge, as well as Dion, who played your season of Survival Challenge. Just kind of asked them for some advice. They've seen my games. fairly closely. They know who I am, what my strengths, weaknesses are, and I was just like, hey, like, I'm trying not to psych myself out, just looking for some advice, any critiques you have in my game, things I can fix. And really, they all kind of told me the same thing. They're like, just be yourself. But the biggest piece of advice I got, which those that know me know that I do love myself a good showmance. So the number one piece of advice I got from Sam and Becca was, Austin, do not go for the showmance. Like, even if it's right there, leave it alone. Dion's advice for me was to play as a gay man. I need to think like a gay man in the game. So, I took the advice to heart and didn't get many showmances in the game. But yeah, so that was kind of going into the game for me.
So, since you saw the cast in advance, was there anyone in particular that you looked at as like, oh, this person might be a problem, or oh, wow, I really want to work with this person?
I think for me, I was kind of open to everything. I knew May was playing, so I was excited to get to play with her, but I also knew that she was a big player and going to have a reputation coming into the game. I know Frank talked about it last night. Me and him met for like an hour, maybe a little bit of a night, but never really had a conversation at Dr. Stan's house. But I knew he kind of had a reputation as a chaotic player. And so I was kind of like, I don't know how I feel about that. But, I do want to explore that possibility with him. I don't know. There wasn't really anyone that I was like, oh, my God, like, I'm 100% working with this person no matter what, or I'm going to do my best to find a way to make it happen. Like I said, I felt like it was kind of a good group. Like, even May, like, me and her just kind of really talked a little bit since season 9, since I was supposed to be on Prod. But, like, I was production her season, the tribe handler. I had literally had zero interaction with her. I just got to see her game. So, yeah, for me, there wasn't anyone I was really in the cast that I was overly like that person, like 100% getting with them at some point.
So, one opening twist this season is we've seen the Shot in the Dark in the CBS show, and now you're having Shot in the Dark in your season. How did you feel about that, and what was your first reaction to it?
First reaction was, okay, 3 tribes, now we got Shot in the Dark. It's like, all right, Parker's going all in on the new school type of game. I think most people probably had the same idea of it. Okay, we've seen it on the show. Doesn't really work. So it's whatever. Not that concerned about it. Obviously you're thinking, if I'm in that situation, it's great because maybe I'll get lucky and it'll work for me. But for me, it was just kind of like, Shot in the Dark, whatever. Just kind of like on the real show. Whatever, that's an afterthought. And then that quickly changed.
Well, you had the benefit, I don't know, call it what you will, of being on a tribe where the Shot in the Dark was successful twice, which we'll talk much more about. So I want to talk about your original tribe, and thanks to Frank, I have this to put up here. And so I'd like to just kind of run through your original tribe and just your kind of your thoughts or reactions to seeing everyone here. So I don't know, pick whoever you want to start with.
Oh, goodness. We'll start at the bottom with Amber. Amber is someone that I actually stayed at her house. I think it was after season 8. I was going back home to Florida, and I left super late because I think I was finishing schoolwork at Pete's house, and I didn't want to have to drive all the way back. And I remember I messaged Amber. I was like, hey, I'm driving back home to Florida. You're like live kind of halfway. It would be cool if I like stayed the night. And she was like, yeah, for sure, no problem. And I got there like 1 or 2 in the morning. I didn't see anyone that lived in their house. Because I got there so late. She was like, the door's going to be unlocked. Just come in, go down this hallway, and whatever door it is. So I literally went in, slept, woke up, left, didn't see a soul that lived in the house. So it was super weird. And I think we had dinner in Florida one time with a couple of people when she was on vacation. But so I knew Amber had a reputation as kind of a big player. So I was excited to see her. I know in age, her game kind of got cut short So it's good to see her. Um, I will say, going into this, I was absolutely flabbergasted that they put myself, May, and Reynolds on the same tribe, being that we were kind of the, if you want to call it, 3 of the 4 old schoolers. I remember I was the last person put on blue, so I remember it was me, Megan, and someone else standing there in the final 3, which is kind of ironic that me and Megan were 2 of the final 3 to start on getting put in our tribes. I remember looking and I was like, well, I'm definitely not on the blue tribe. Like, there's no way. And then Parker's like, oh, it's blue. And I was like, oh, it's like, all right. So that was a big surprise for me. But being on the same tribe with May, I was super excited about. Again, knew she's a great player. Also knowing that she's got a reputation, so I figured she might be a shield for me if I needed it later in the game. I was very curious how that dynamic would work. But again, watching her in 5, I knew she was a feisty player. She'd kind of blow up if things didn't go her way. So I was very curious to see that dynamic play out. Josh, didn't really know anything about him coming into the game. I think we had a little bit of conversation in the house. And I thought he was pretty cool. But again, didn't really know much about him. Reynolds, obviously from season 4, we worked together pretty much the whole game. So I voted out as number 1 and then followed out the door next. So I was excited to just see Reynolds back because I know both of us have put a lot into Reelfoot over the years. Nate was another one that I kind of figured would be back, just kind of like the challenge beast. Was glad to have him on our tribe since we didn't have Todd. So if there was any sumo type of competition, it's be like, that's all you, bud. I think I even messaged him that before the game. I said, I hope there's sumo so we can see you versus Todd. So yeah, just knowing that we had that and that because after Nate, it was me was probably going to be the next one up as the big guy that would have to go in that situation, and that would have been really fun. And then Frank, again, he was kind of someone that just had seen in person, really didn't have any interaction with, just kind of doing based off reputation, hearing Stan and Pete talk about him. So he was someone that I was very curious about getting to know. I think he was probably the person I was most interested in getting to know, and just kind of seeing how he played the game and how he changed his game a second time coming in.
So talk to me about just kind of the opening dynamics of this tribe that first day in the game.
Yeah, so we get to that camp, and I think literally everyone just like set their bags down and immediately got to work on getting our camp set. Frank ripped his belt off and just started going to town and doing all the paracord he had. I think Nate started on the fire, had it started in 2 minutes. And then the rest of us, it was immediately like, okay, firewood. And then I think Frank kind of helped with doing getting the tarp set up. And I remember whoever, Trevor was down there live streaming, and he was like, yeah, he's like, the live streamers are like, oh, you can tell these people have definitely played before. So it was literally just like everyone came to camp like, all right, let's get this over with so we can have an easy night. Then we can all kind of talk, get to know each other a little bit better. So, I mean, we literally came into camp, threw our bags down, and just hit the ground running.
Who were you having? Who were the first people you were having conversation with, or who are the people you're like, I need to make sure I'm good with these people, or I want to get in with these people?
I mean, for me, it was kind of everyone. Since I didn't, outside of Reynolds, I didn't really have a very big pre-existing relationship with. May to a little bit of an extent. But really, the other 4, it was kind of like, I don't know too much about these people, especially in the game. So for me, it was just kind of make sure you're having conversations with everybody so that when numbers do start forming, your people are going to be like, I want Austin within those numbers.
Was anything surprising? Did anyone stand out to you or surprise you that first day then?
I mean, I think Frank, just from, I knew him as a chaotic player. I didn't know that you could just do the rope and he can build practically anything. I think if you gave that man an unlimited supply of rope, that he could probably build a city if he wanted. So, I mean, that was just like incredible to watch. Like, I think I would just sit at Blue Camp and just like watch him run around, just nonstop building things. And it was just incredible to watch. So yeah, I think Frank was the one that I was most pleasantly surprised by. He was literally like his own TV show to an extent. It was like having HGTV at camp.
So you have an opening reward challenge that day, and this challenge requires like unscrabbling a word phrase, and this does not go well for your tribe. You all lose this opening reward challenge.
Yeah, so I mean, wasn't overly upset about it. I mean, it's opening challenge, opening reward. Obviously, it would have been nice for morale, but I think our tribe, we felt good going into the next day, and then any immunity challenges, we felt like we had a strong tribe with a good balance of different strengths. And yeah, so I mean, that one was kind of whatever, but wasn't too upset about it.
How was that first night sleeping at the tribe camp?
Apparently, I just sleep wherever I want, whatever I want, and I was sawing logs out there. For me,
I hear you slept really great.
Apparently, I did. I didn't think I was. I remember like everyone was kind of sitting around the fire talking. And I think May and Amber were kind of the first two, like, all right, we're going to go to bed. And I was kind of like, oh, perfect. I was ready to go to bed anyways. So we lay down on the tarp. And I'm laying there. And honestly, I did not felt like I slept at all. Usually the first night in the game is super rough for me. I usually don't fall asleep until like the sun starts coming up. And then I'm always the last one up. And then I hate it. So I honestly, I felt like I was just laying there with my head on the back of my pillow, not being able to sleep. And I kind of like sat up a little bit later, and everyone was like, "Oh, it must be nice to be able to sleep." And I was like, "What?" I was like, "I haven't slept today." We're like, "Yeah, you were, dude. You were snoring so loud." They're just like losing my mind. I was like, "Nah, like, ain't no way." But that seemed to be a common trend throughout the game for me. So apparently. Like even I was telling my mom about it after the game, and she couldn't believe it. She was like, because my dad and my brother are horrific snorers, and my mom was like, she was like, Austin, she was like, I've never heard you be like, she was like, you snore, but like not anything like them. But apparently, I was like a Tyrannosaurus Rex out there,
or at least like there's nothing, no other sounds, just you, and so it just becomes more noticeable.
Yeah, apparently.
So day 2, you have 2 more reward challenges. The first one's the memory matching challenge. How was this for you? Also, Frank wants to note that you have the worst X-Men power ever, but I would say sleeping wherever you can on command, especially outdoors with no sleeping bag or mat, is not a bad one.
Yeah, it's whatever, I guess. It is what it is at this point. Obviously, it didn't annoy them too much because they didn't vote me out for it. So.
Hi, when I played Reelfoot All-Star season, I snored too loud, so I got voted out. It'd be a bad way for the story to end.
Yeah, definitely. But no, so the memory matching challenge, going into that was interesting. May had brought up, wanting to work with a tribe, since there was 3 tribes, and in survival challenge, I was on the end of the stick where we were the tribe that got ganged up on by the other 2. So I'm like, when our tribe started talking about it, I was like, hey, I'd rather be ahead of the curve because I remember this being on the opposite end and it was not fun in survival challenge. I didn't really have a preference on which tribe. Obviously, May was kind of adamant about working with Yellow, and I think everyone just was kind of like, okay, but then it never really agreed to it to like a full extent. And then in that challenge, May was right to my left shoulder, and I just remember she was like Skylar or someone out there from Yellow, and it was like, and I was just kind of like, oh, like, all right, you're not hiding this at all, like. So that was super interesting. I think that was kind of the biggest takeaway from the game. We were not very good at matching because we couldn't. It was no verbal help, but you could point, nod your head if people were at the right one. And there had to have been 3 where we knew there was 2 of them. I went and flipped over one, and then went to the second one and was told the wrong one probably 3 times in a row. Which, I mean, I didn't remember where they were, so I was just kind of like, I would go to the general area where I knew it was and just pick one and be like, is this good? Is this the right one? No? Okay, let me go over here. No? One more up? Okay. But yeah, so that's always a fun challenge. Obviously, in survival challenge, that was a big moment in the game for me getting a
Yeah, were you
advantage.
thrilled that you didn't select one of the tiles that sent you to a tribe camp this game?
No, because I obviously once those as soon as Parker said that those were in there, I was like, oh, like here we go again. Like hopefully this time it will be an idol for myself, because that was one thing I really wanted to do. I've never done in a game was find an idol.
We tried in our game. It's just we put our tents over we put our camp over where the idol was.
We slept on top of it. But yeah, so that was. I actually wanted to get something or have someone send me back to camp because that was when everyone was kind of like, oh, like if an idol hadn't been hidden, it's hidden now at this point. So yeah, so I kind of wanted to get that again. Obviously, didn't. Not a big deal. I try not to get stressed out or frustrated over things when they don't go my way. But yeah, I mean I think we tied that challenge, or I think we got second.
Mm-hmm. I think second.
I don't remember what we won. It's reward day, so anything's nice.
Coming back from camp, you have Adam who's there now.
Yes, we get to bring Adam back because Yellow and Red had both had people sent back to their camp. Blue didn't have anyone sent back. So what we did, we were walking back to camp, and as we walk down, as soon as we get to camp, like everyone just kind of goes off looking for the idol, and it's just me and Adam. And Adam just kind of looked at me, and I was like, dang, I really want to go look for the idol, but I don't want to just leave this dude sitting here like we don't care about him. Like he's not going to be here that long. Like this could be like a good moment for me to make an early relationship with someone on another tribe. So I was like, I guess I'll just stand here and talk to Adam for a few minutes. So we talked for probably about 5 minutes, just me and Adam. And we were just kind of laughing at the fact that people would spread it out. Then I was like, okay. I was like, I need to go to the bathroom. I was like, so I'll be back. Obviously, I didn't need to go to the bathroom. I was going to where there was one spot where I was like, the idol has to be here. Mm-hmm. And it is where it was, so it makes me mad. And as I was walking down that way, because me and Amber had said they were going to the bathroom, they were coming up from the bathroom area, which the tree was further down past the bathroom area where I thought it was. And Amber just had the biggest smile on her face. So I was like, okay. I was like, I know. Like you could tell she was trying to hide the secret, but she was just so excited. So I was like, okay, Amber's probably got the idol. Me and her were working together at that point. So I was like, it's fine. I know where it's at. And then just kind of went back to camp. Everyone kind of talked to Adam at that point. Like Frank said, he was kind of just like, oh, Yellow doesn't do anything. Yellow doesn't talk to people. He just sit there and kind of stare at each other like this all day. And we were all just kind of like, oh, that's weird. Yeah, but it was fun. Obviously, got to show him around our camp, show him all the stuff that Frank built. I mean, I felt like I had gotten the most kind of individual time with him, so I was kind of optimistic. Obviously, nothing too big like strategy talk happened between the two of us, but I felt in a swap situation if I was with him and anyone from Blue, if he had to pick a Blue to work with, maybe it would be me, just because I have that little bit extra one-on-one time.
Yeah, so the next challenge, then you have the endurance challenge. We have to hold up a box between with your legs with a partner, and there's temptations during the course. Who was your partner for this challenge?
Nate. It was me and Nate. We were kind of dubbed the strong team from the jump for that. So I was super excited about that. I was a soccer player, so I was like, I feel like my leg strength and endurance is going to be good. The only endurance challenge we had in Reelfoot when I played last time was the bucket over the head. And that one was like, my arm was like, I couldn't move an inch without it falling. And so I didn't last very long. And so I'd always wanted to have an endurance challenge where I'd go for a while. They started bringing out the food. I think it was 30 minutes in. Frank and Reynolds were immediately like, we're eating. And then obviously they got a few more things because other teams weren't dropping. And then Skylar and Carly dropped, I believe. And then they got the water bottle, which I thought was so funny. Because when I saw Storm had a crock pot like on his chest, so obviously they're keeping it hidden. And I was like, I will never drop for this because I know it's not going to be anything that's worth it. So that made me laugh. Just I was like, woo. And then they didn't want the alcohol at all, which I was kind of like, I could go for that right now.
Being in the heats for the past hour.
Yeah, and then so the last one that they brought out was the um, peanut butter and the Oreos, and for me, that was really the only one that I had any like inclination or kind of like maybe I should drop for this one because I know the peanut butter would be good. Obviously, it'd be great for Nate too. But I also knew I was like, if me and Nate drop, like we're not winning this challenge.
Yeah.
Because we were the strongest team on our tribe. And Nate even asked me, he was like, "Do you want to drop?" And I was like, "No, not really." And he was like, "Okay." And again, it was kind of I wanted to do an endurance challenge, stick it out, see how long I could go. I know people were like, "It's just for a mat and a cot. Like it's not that big of a deal. You're wasting all your energy." But for me, that was just kind of more so just a survivor, like bucket list check item, doing an endurance challenge and going for that long. Because honestly, when we started, I was like, "Oh no, like this is not as easy as I thought it was going to be." The first 5 minutes, my legs were shaking like crazy, and I was like, "I don't know how I'm going to last," and that's not a good look for me because I'm supposed to be like me and Nate are supposed to be a strong team, and if I mess this up, people are going to look at me like, "Bro, what are you doing?" But after the first 5 minutes, you kind of like get in that groove, like things kind of start to go numb, and then you don't really think about it as much. Then at that point, I mean, for me, it felt like it went pretty fast. Got some nice tan on my leg. My shins have been peeling like crazy the last few days.
Oh man,
so that was nice.
Places you don't put sunblock normally.
Oh, I didn't put any sunblock on the entire game.
That is aggressive.
Yeah, I told him. I said I'm from Florida. We don't believe in that stuff.
Do your shins still feel that way?
Yeah, I mean it's not terrible peeling, but I got a good tan, so that's what I was happy about. I've been pale for too
long. So, kind of wrapping up the reward challenges, you're kind of like towards not quite the end of day 2. There's still a immunity challenge. Actually, let's talk about the immunity challenge first. So, you have your first immunity challenge, and this is kind of a multi-part challenge where there's swimming, there's tossing balls in the buckets, there's a snake puzzle. Where were you at this challenge?
I was at the ball toss. I think I maybe talked about doing the swimming. Which thank God I did. Like I know I'm from Florida, but like that would not have been fun. So I was at the ball toss with Corey and Taylor, which I was excited about because those were two people that I thought could potentially be allies later on in the game. So just getting to talk to them, kind of get a feel for their dynamics, and then obviously I think we were standing there talking before they'd even started the challenge, and the original bucket they had out there was on the opposite side of the pond, and I just remember being like, "There's no way they're making them swim that far there and back twice." And then like we found out like it was a storm and kind of pushed it out further, so then they took another one out there, and then when they started, we were watching them swim, and we were just like, "Wow, like Brent's not struggling at all. Everybody else is yikes." So I was just kind of watching that and just being like, "Oh my gosh, like I hope these people are okay out there." So it was not a fun one to watch. And then Amber and Frank were at the beams, and Amber was screaming at production that someone was going to get hurt. And so it was just kind of like, "Ooh, like let's see how this plays out." Yellow
no one died.
No one died, thank God. But Yellow kind of flew through it. Brent and Skylar were, I mean, it was tough on them, but they were just obviously much better swimmers than the other two tribes. So Yellow kind of flew through it. And I think Red, I don't remember if Red got to the planes before us or after, but Frank and Amber did an amazing job of flying through that part of it. Like I was just standing there like, wow, like they have zero issues with this. Like I just need to make this ball quick because obviously Josh is waiting at the end for the puzzle, and everybody knows what's going to happen if Josh has some time to do a puzzle before other people. So I know Corey struggled getting 2 balls in. Corey struggled getting them in because and I knew what he was doing wrong. He was just doing the normal like underhand toss. And I knew you needed to do it like the carnival game with the huge bucket. You got to like put some backspin on it. So Corey was just throwing it underhand the whole time, whereas I was throwing it like this so I could get a little backspin on it so it wouldn't bounce out. Like, because I think I watched Corey have one ball bounce out at least 12 times. And I knew it was getting super frustrating for him just having to constantly run back and forth as he was bouncing out. So I was like, there's no way I'm doing that. Like, I'm getting this over and letting Josh bring this home for us. And that's what happened.
Yeah. So you met Corey on a reward challenge at Pirate Survival Expedition, right? Is that the only time you've met him before?
So actually, when it was during Warrior Survival Challenge in Maine,
He
I went
competed
up
and
to
you were
watch. Yeah, I went up to watch in 2016. I had applied but didn't get picked, obviously. And I remember seeing Corey, and I was like, oh, like, because he had long hair at the time too. I was like, oh, well, I know who they picked over me. And I think we were both just drinking a beer at the after party, and we were both just kind of standing there and looked at each other, and we're like, what's up? And like introduced ourselves, had like a very brief conversation. And then a pirate, he had won season 1 pirate, and the reward at final 6 or final 5. I think it was 5 because it was the blocks or whatever.
Oh, that thing.
Yeah, I won that one from Malcolm. But no, the reward was to get to talk to the 2 winners from the first 2 seasons, being Corey and Kirk. And I really didn't want anyone to have that reward because I knew that talk would be getting me out. So at that point, like when I won that, I got to have a beer and talk to those 2. And it really wasn't anything because it was everyone knew I was the favorite at that point, kind of. So it was just kind of like Corey and Kirk were both like, hey, just keep doing what you're doing. You're going to be fine. We didn't really talk that much. So it's kind of like me and Corey have just watched each other play and just had very small interactions. But yeah, so I mean, he was someone that I knew that there'd definitely be the potential to work together. Just obviously he had cut his hair, didn't have the long hair, but just kind of the long hair bro dynamic.
So your tribe ends up winning, and you're safe from the first tribal council. Over the course of day 2, had there been much strategy, or where did you feel yourself kind of fitting into this tribe?
Yeah, so the strategy talk had definitely started by day 2. I felt like a lot of strategy conversations on Oconee happened at the top of the trail right as you came into camp. So once you went past our tarp, it was just kind of like you go down, that was the bathroom area, it wasn't super far. And I think for me, that was the one thing that I didn't like about our camp was that there wasn't really areas you could go talk without people seeing, you, like literally just seeing you and whoever talking. So what we would always do is we'd go to the top of the trail to see if we could see if they were setting up a challenge, if it was close to being ready, so we could figure out if we'd be leaving soon. So usually someone would be like, oh, I'm going to go up to the top of the trail and check and see what's going on. And usually someone would be like, okay, I'll go with you. And then usually they'd be up there for 5 minutes or so talking. So, I had kind of been doing that with pretty much everyone at that point. Probably the least so with Nate and Josh because I felt like they both kind of more so stayed in the camp shelter area. But May had come to me and had made a final 2 with me. And then I know Frank talked about it last night. He had also proposed a final 2 to me. And he proposed a final 2, and then he was like, he's like, just like, prove it to you. And reaches in his pants and just like, I see him rip something. He's like, here you go. If you don't believe me or if you feel like I burned you, you can use this to blow my game up later. And I look at it and it says Frank's final 2 receipt. And Frank was right. That did kind of set off some flags in my head. I was like, wow, if this dude's got one on his pants ready to go, I was like, he's probably got one on his shirt, a hoodie, a poncho, sweatpants, whatever. Like, he's probably got 5 or 6 of these things on him. So I was like, it was kind of a red flag of being like, ooh, this is why we were thinking we might need to be cautious about Frank. Obviously, I think Reynolds probably has it right now because Reynolds, I guess, accidentally took my game bag and my swim trunks were in it. It was in my swim trunks pocket. So Reynolds, if Reynolds said he was going to wash the stuff and send it to me, check the pockets on the shorts. The receipt might be in there.
That sounds like a valuable Reelfoot artifact that needs to be saved.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because at swap camp, I still had it in my pocket and it fell out. I got up to go to the bathroom or something, and I was sitting on the bench, and I came back and I saw it. Luckily, it was face down. So I remember I walked up and I was going to sit back down and I saw it sitting there and I was like, whoop. And I just kind of like casually grabbed it and stuffed it back in my pants.
Imagine if Sharif finds that.
Yeah, like everyone would be like, oh, who is sitting here? Oh, who's not here? Austin. Like, oh, this is interesting. So yeah, no, that definitely kind of set off some red flags. I felt good with Reynolds and Amber, that they were two that I could really work with.
Amber would like to remind you that you also made a final two with her.
Did I really?
How many final twos did you make?
Listen, I don't go around throwing out final twos that frequently. Usually, if I'll let people can come to me and pitch final two all day, and I'll agree with it. But me, like putting out the final twos, that's usually what I'll stick to. Like when we played Pirate together, Julie was my ride or die number one final two. And she got out, and I was kind of looking for a home. And then at the merge, I told you I was like, I want to go to the end with you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of stuck to that, even though other people had come to me and said, let's go to the end. And I was like,
great.
So, for me, I guess out of those three, May was probably the one I was taking the most seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, listened to Frank last night, the dynamic of them wanting to throw a challenge later on, where it would have been me and May on the outs, was news to me. So obviously, I'm very glad that they were swapped at that point. But no, I felt like I was in a good position. Really, the only two I didn't feel I had like a super solid connection with was Nate or Josh. Just because, again, I felt like they stayed near camp a lot, so it was kind of harder to have those strategy conversations with them. I know at one point me and Josh had gone to the top of the trail. And honestly, I don't know if I said it in a confessional or just talking to someone, but I don't know why, but Josh kind of reminded me of myself when I played him for.
Mm-hmm.
Just kind of the way he carried himself was a little bit more quiet and reserved, especially at the beginning. But I could tell that he had that passion and love for the game. Obviously, he talked about his business, things like that. And then he also lives in Mobile, which is an hour from where I'm from. I did like him, but I just felt we never really got to have two in-depth strategy talks. But I did really like him. But as things progress, I was kind of like, hey, it seems like the tide's going that way, where he's going to be the first boot if we do go to the tribal.
Mm-hmm. Had anything been formalized in of night two of where you want to vote, or it's just kind of impressions? This is where we're probably leaning.
Yeah, I think it was more so kind of the impression of if we do lose, it's probably going to be Josh.
Well, how was sleeping? How was your night two sleep? Just as good?
Just as good, apparently. I can't remember if it was night one or night two. It was probably night one. But it was me, May, Amber. And I just remember I woke up at one point and May was gone. And I was like, where'd she go? And Amber was like, she moved because of your snoring. And I was like, whoops. And I think it was the morning of day two when I got up. May was like, Austin, I love you, but oh my God, that is horrific.
Reelfoot just brings the best out of you. What can I say?
Yeah. I don't know if Frank talked about it last night. I don't think he did. And I don't remember if it was night one or night two, but we had the biggest scare ever at camp. I know I was asleep this time. I had my buff pulled up over my face, had my hood pulled shut. I'm sound asleep, and then the next thing I know, I just hear Nate screaming like someone's murdering him. He's being attacked by an animal or something. And I don't know if I've ever woke up and sat up so fast in my entire life. While he's doing that, May's like, it's me, it's me, it's me. Apparently, May had gotten up, went to tend the fire, stick, hit the metal thing that was off by the side Nate was sleeping on, and just freaked him out. But that, I'll let those two talk about that more, but that was one of the scariest moments I've ever had in the game.
Wow. Yeah, no, because it's one thing I always forget until playing these games is just how absolutely dark it gets in the forest at night.
Oh,
and you just have to pretend like, they wouldn't. they won't maroon us in an area where there's bears, coyotes, things that are probably going to eat us. But there's a little bit of that, like, there's that unknown that sinks in his people.
Yeah, yeah. There were 2 or 3 times throughout the week where I woke up um, and the fire had gone out, and I couldn't even see my hand in front of me. There was one night blue it happened, and I was like, I got up and I was like, okay, I'm gonna try to like get it. I didn't know where the flashlight was, so I was literally just like shuffling my feet, and I almost stepped on Nate, and that was pre Nate Ame freak out incident. So who knows what would have happened at that point. Yeah, no, I had forgotten how dark it gets when there's no fire.
So day 3, Sebastian's voted out. And then you have your next community challenge, and this is a blindfold challenge where you get to collect stuff, place some letters in the alphabet. There's a whole math sequence thing. Where were you in this challenge?
I was at the alphabet station, blindfolded,
Okay.
with Josh guiding me. But I remember as we walked in that challenge, obviously we're getting our first look at red for the first time. None of us were too surprised about Bash being the first blue. I think he was kind of one that we figured would be a likely candidate. But as they're walking in, Taylor just mouths to all, like, I think of both tribes. She was like, it was 4-3, 3 votes on me. And I was kind of like, oh, wow. Like, Taylor's a big hitter. And if she had gone out first, that would have been crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I was kind of like, okay, like this game like is going to be intense. Like if we've got a 4-3 vote at the very first tribal of the season. But yeah, no, getting into the challenge, we were the second station. And originally Josh said, before they blindfolded us, we could see the letters in the bucket. Josh was like, when we start, just like dump it. And I was like, just let me grab them out of the bucket. That way I know where they are, not like scrambling pieces around. And I mean, we had a great system now. It felt like, I think we were a little behind on that, maybe from whoever was at first at the time. But I feel like me and him did a good job of making up a lot of time and getting through it pretty quick. And at that point, it was just waiting, hoping that Nate would be able to figure out the math thing. And he did. He pulled through for us, and that was big. Obviously, Megan got it first and was smart and immediately just scattered the numbers. Yeah, and actually, me and Nate had kind of gone back and forth on who was going to do the math originally. And then he felt confident in it, so I was like, all right, well, you got it, man. I was like, I'll put faith and trust in you to pull it off, and he did come through for us, so it was great.
Anything of consequence happening for the next community challenge?
Not that I know of.
You mentioned before you knew that you had a strong suspicion that Amber had the idol. Did she ever tell you? Did you ever ask her?
Yeah, she did. She pulled, I think, me and Reynolds at the same time and told both of us. And she told us that May knew because May was with her when she found it. And I did think it was funny that Amber said, like, she told me, I think it was separately, that she, like, dove across Amber. Or Amber dove across May to get it because she wanted it so bad. So she told us, and then it was kind of me, Amber, Reynolds, and May were up at the top of the path. And then Frank come up there, and she said it again. So I was kind of like, oh wow, like, you know, like it's everybody, and she has it. Which for me, like, if I ever found that, like, I don't tell nobody. I don't care who you are, number one or not. I'm not telling you. So I was like, at least I know where it's at, and it's someone I trust at this point. So yeah, it felt good because I was like 99.9% sure she had it. But then just having that confirmation, and then obviously the trust of her to tell us that she had it.
All right, so your third immunity challenge. This is the gross food challenge. What did you get to eat?
I got to go last and eat half an onion. I actually knew what it was before they even brought it out because as I was walking up there, I heard someone on production say it's an onion, and I was trying to be like, oh, because I think.
That's a lot of onion to eat.
Everyone was waiting. Yeah. You don't think it's a lot until you try to do it in 3 minutes. Yeah, I heard someone from production say it, and you know, Amber was like very concerned about going and getting something bad, and I was like, you know, really, gross food challenge was very loose term, which is more of a food challenge. Um, like I think I would have been fine eating pretty much any of this stuff. It was just the onion, and there was so much I couldn't get down. Um, I can't swallow pills to save my life, so like I have to chew stuff up.
Mm-hmm.
Like I can't even like the little pills they give you for your stomach when you have surgery. I can't swallow that. Like I just chew things up. If there's a gel, I just bite it open and suck the juice out. There's a great Frank story. Frank gave me a fish oil one, and I did it, and everyone was kind of like looked at me weird. So I told him, and I was like, "Oh, like that actually didn't taste that bad." I was like, "It's kind of like candy, like with the like juice in it." And Frank's like, "Oh, like a gusher?" And I was like, "Yeah." So Frank's like, "Oh, let me try." So he did it. Thought it was the worst thing in the world. Like, that's not a gusher. I don't know what you're talking about, Austin. So that was a little fun moment at camp. Yeah, so I knew that. Really, I think what hurt me was I was like, all right, like I don't like onions, but I just gotta like go hard on this thing to start. So I was taking massive bites out of this thing. Like I probably had half of it half of it bitten off, like chewing up. And I think my problem was I had so much in my mouth that as I was trying to chew it up, I just couldn't get them small enough bits to swallow.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was at the point where they were like, "There's a minute left." I was like, "I'm not going to be able to finish it." And like over and Corey was done, and I was like, "Come on, Taylor." I was like, "Don't finish," because I could tell she was struggling. I was like, "Let's let this go to a tiebreaker. 2 other people can handle it." Yeah, I mean, fortunately, that's what happened, and I just spit all of it out. So like, I'm not going to keep eating this. But my mouth it felt like it was on fire for about the rest of that day for sure, and a little bit of the next morning. It was not fun.
So coming back to camp, how much of a scramble was there before tribal council?
Um, I don't know if it was as much scrambling to figure out the plan that everyone was kind of already lean towards, as much as people trying to make sure that Josh felt comfortable. There was some talk of, okay, like there is shot in the dark. What if he plays it? What if he gets it safe? And I distinctly remember this conversation I had with Nate, where we were talking about it, like voting for him, because Nate said he had heard Josh had brought up his name as well as May's name. So he was fine with that. And I was like, okay. I was like, well, do you have any thoughts on if shot in the dark is played and it works? Like, who would you want to do on the revo? And Nate said, I don't know. We'll just figure it out at a live tribal. And I was like, nah, I said, I ain't doing that at the 3rd tribal of this game. So I think like as we were talking to other people, Nate had kind of emerged as a backup plan on a revo, which I think everyone was kind of like, oh, like if he does play, it's not going to work. Shot in the dark, it never works. But there was something in my gut, and I think this was kind of a good point for me in the game. I was like, awesome, what do we want to do coming into this game? Trust our gut. Take some bigger risks than we have in the past. And there was something in me that, like, literally, like halfway through conversations, I was like, I would like for Josh to stay. I don't think I want to see him go. I think I could work with him. And so I felt so bad, like telling him these lies, like it's Nate or whatever it was. And I just remember, like at one point, I was kind of off by myself. I think it's like waiting my turn to like join a group or like talk to one person. And I was like, you know what? I was like, we're going big. I was like, we're gonna tell him. It's Josh isn't a dumb player. Josh is very smart. I knew that. I figured going into that tribal, he knew he was getting votes, so he was probably going to end up playing it regardless. And my thought process was, okay, well, if he plays it and by some chance it works, he's not going to want to work with any of us. There's a swap, like we're all dead to him probably. I was like, so what if I was like, I can pull him aside and be like, hey, like everyone's telling you this plan, it's not true. The vote's you. But then I also have to consider, if he knows the vote's him now, at that point, if I tell him, he can very easily go back to camp and just blow my game up on the spot and be like, Austin just told me everything, y'all are lying to me, vote me out, and just throw me under the bus and kind of run me over. And, I kind of sat in my head, I was like, I wanted to play bigger, more bold for myself this time. So I did it. I pulled Josh aside and I was like, look, man, everyone's telling you this. I was like, they're lying to you. I was like, I know you're a smart player. I'm not saying this to be like, oh, I told you to play shot in the dark, and if it works, I'm the one that saved you. Like, no, this is me just trying to build trust with you because I think there's potential there. So I was like, so if I was you, play your shot in the dark. I hope it works. And then we'll go from there, trying to figure out a plan. Hopefully there's a swap or something we can, kind of work together more. I was like, and I even told him, I said, I know I'm taking a big risk by telling you this. I'm like, I know you can go back to camp right now and blow me up. I was like, that's the risk I'm willing to take because I want to work with you.
Mm-hmm.
He appreciated it. And we walked back down to camp. I think people were just kind of sitting on the couch and by the fire at that point. And I immediately see him go in his socks and pull out his Hidden Immunity Idol from last season. Obviously, I didn't know it was from last season, but I just knew it was fake when I knew he had the jewelry store. So I was like, oh, this dude was smart. So there was one necklace you could bring into the game. So he brought an idol, was going to use it as fake. Like, good for him. Only because I knew Amber had the idol.
Mm-hmm.
So then he goes and kind of like, he puts it on and goes and stands in an area where everyone can see him. And it's just kind of like standing there. And you can see people kind of looking around like, oh, like, do you see his neck? And I think it was May made a comment like, oh, Josh, that's a nice necklace. Didn't you get that last season? So it's kind of, and everyone also knew where the idol was. So it's kind of like no one was falling for it. So, and then as we're leaving to go to camp, I thought this was just like, I thought it was funny. Just trying to be like, I'm like the confidence of like trying to play it off as a fake idol. Josh didn't bring a single thing with him. None of his belongings. He left everything sitting on the bench. Like when we left, he just started marching the travel. So I thought that was pretty funny and cool to see. We get there. I'm just like, whatever it's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's voting Josh to play a shot in the dark so I can go home. We go through tribal, get to the vote. And I'm like, I still have to vote Josh. Like, save face with everyone. Because if I throw a vote and something weird happens, it's going to be like, what the heck? Especially if he does go home. So I still voted Josh. I felt good if there was going to be a revote. He brings the votes out. Asks if anyone has anything they want to play. Josh takes his shot in the dark up there. And as Parker's unrolling it, the way the sun was hitting it at times, you could kind of see through the back of it. And it looked like it said, to me, from where I was sitting, it looked like it said not safe. Like it looked like you'd see the not above safe. So I was just like, damn, that sucks. And Parker's like, Josh, you are safe. And I was like, oh, I was like, it worked. I was like, this. And obviously, I know I'm like, this is the first time it's ever like going to actually work and save somebody. So I was just trying not to jump out of my seat and excitement and just kind of being like, whatever. And then Frank mentioned that Josh kind of slapped him and Nate, I believe, and was like, have fun voting for each other. And I was just like, oh, I was like, this is about to be sick. But then Reynolds goes, I already did. And I was like, what? This guy was trying to like, uh-oh. Like, I was like, what's Reynolds talking about? And then it's doesn't count. One vote left. Third person voted out. And it was kind of like, oh my gosh. Flips it, and it's Nate. And it was just like, dang, like, that's wild, guys. Which, I mean, if I remember correctly, was going to be the backup one. But so as we're leaving camp, it's kind of like, Reynolds, like, why did you throw that vote to begin with? And he was like, Nate told me to. I was like, ain't nobody telling someone to vote for him at the third tribal council of the game. He was like, no, Nate said to throw a vote on him, like he would take one for the team if something crazy happened. And I was just like, bro, there's no way this dude said this on his second chance. Like, that's something someone does their first time playing. And then they come back in an unfinished business season. Like, I'm not doing that again. But I talked to Nate after the game. He explained why he did it. Made so much more sense hearing it. I'll let him talk about that on his deep dive. But once I got a chance to talk to Nate post game and understand his thinking and logic behind it, it made a lot of sense. So now I'm like, okay, like I get it.
Had you and May talked about at all about trying to put a vote on Frank or so in case of the shot in the dark?
So this is the thing. I don't know if I'm remembering this wrong. I remember talking to Reynolds, and I was like, what if shot in the dark happens. Apparently, I was the one that said Frank, but from my memory, I could have sworn that it was Reynolds that was like Frank, and I was like, okay, like I'm not opposed to it because I feel like he's this unknown quantity to me later in the game. And I went and talked to May, and I was like, well, Reynolds had mentioned Frank, and she was like, I would be on board for that, and I was like, well, okay, I was like, that's 3. So, I mean, maybe I remember that wrong, but I put in the group chat earlier that I'm the winner of this season, so my opinion's the right one on everything. So it was Reynolds that said Frank's name that traveled, not me.
Well, so was there any follow-up after Tribal Council then, especially with Josh being safe?
Well, it's funny because we were going back to camp and Josh was again just kind of like marching, making a beeline, like wasn't like walking with anyone back to camp. And very ironically, Amber's like, oh my God, protect the rice, protect the rice, protect the flit. And then Amber starts like running past him to go make sure Josh doesn't like destroy anything or like throw the rice out. So Amber like runs and protects the rice. And then Josh is like, where's the flint as soon as we get back to camp? And I think people were kind of scared to give it to him, but they did. And because our fire was out, and he immediately just went to work on the fire. Like he didn't have a blow up at all. But it was just, obviously it's very ironic looking on the end of the game now where Amber was the one like, protect the rice. Someone's going to dump the rice. Yeah, I mean, I know Josh kind of went off. I think he had a moment for himself, which understandably so. He came into camp, and then, that's kind of when people started talking it out as a group. And then Frank kind of gave him the blue beads from his hat to like add to it so it would have all 3 tribe colors in the game. And he could maybe pass it off to someone else that didn't know that he had it from last season.
So you go to your next challenge, and were you expecting a swap, or were you surprised?
I was kind of expecting one, kind of a little hoping for one, just to kind of mix things up. And for me, I was hoping to be on a tribe with Josh so we could really kind of solidify a bond and try to work together some more. But so, I think I was probably maybe one of the more least surprised people on our tribe that it was, just because I felt like that was a good point for them to mix it up.
Well, you swap and you stay on the Quoney tribe, the blue tribe, although you have to start over at a new location, so you lose some amenities that Frank made. Your new tribe has some familiar faces. You take Frank and May with you, and then you also get Corey, Skylar, Sharif, Tony, Carlos, and Megan. So you go to a tribe of 9, which is pretty large, and that's a decent amount of insulation.
Yeah, no, it definitely was. And I employed the strategy in both Pirate and Reelfoot. For me, like I don't think it does anything for your game, but I very much subscribe to the Tyson philosophy in Blood vs. Water that I want to go last in any kind of drawing. Like that was a lot of times I ran off to pee that I didn't have to. It was just so I could be at the back of the line because everyone would have already drawn by the time I came back. So like I purposely put myself at the back of the line and tribe. I was like, the survivor gods, fate are going to put me on whatever tribe I want to be the last one drawn from the bucket. And I did that the entire game. So yeah, I made sure I just wanted to be last. Obviously stayed on blue. Saw it's 3-3-3. So I was like, this is going to be fun. And I kind of thought like, all right, it's probably going to be blue and red trying to get a yellow or 2 out just because they hadn't lost anyone at that point. Obviously, we had only lost 1, but red had lost 2. It's kind of going that dynamic. But then I see May and Skylar are both on our tribe, and I was like, that's not going to go well because I know that's going to be an immediate, easy target for a lot of people.
Are they just is it just known they're close together?
Yeah, it was just widely known. The helping and the matching challenge didn't help the cause at all. But I do think that had already been talked about if they ever did get together. So then especially kind of in that dynamic where it was 3-3-3 and it was kind of like, well, those 2 are automatically going to be together. And I mean, honestly, I think within the first 5 minutes of getting to camp, people were like, one of these 2 are going.
Yeah, I mean, and Frank to talk about how he put in some work immediately because he was wary of both you and May, and
Yeah,
just went to every single other person that I want to vote May. I'm voting May. Let's vote
yeah,
May.
yeah. And so for me, like, I was like, okay, like, it's not what I would like to do, but like, I get it. My preference at that standpoint, I wanted Skylar out
Mm.
because May was my number one at that point. Obviously, I had that lunch with Skylar, and that was it. So for me, it was kind of like between the two. I'm like, I got to choose May.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but as everyone was talking, which was actually really funny because I was trying to just make sure I was off talking to people a lot that first night that we swapped, especially since we lost.
Yeah.
But
Anything you want to say about that challenge, real fast?
um, no, I mean I feel like that challenge is always kind of a hit or miss one. I've done it in one, I've done it in lost. Um, so we tried to just put people who'd done it before and won
Mm-hmm.
out there together. We got pretty close that first time. Um, and then the other tribe just kind of was able to do it quicker on the next few times. Obviously, we both kind of employed the same strategy of the second group, just put one block on, drop it, send the first group back in. But yeah, I feel like that one's just kind of a hit or miss. It's a fun one for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I've also done it with more numbers than just four. I feel like I've done it with 8 people holding the ropes. So that might make it a little easier than just 4 or 6 or whatever. I don't remember exactly. Uh, yeah, I would have been 4. I don't know.
And so that night, who are you? So because you're meeting, you've met Corey before, but you're meeting Sharif. You probably met Tony when helping out. You're meeting Carlos. You're meeting Megan. You're kind of meeting Skylar. So there's a lot of new faces here for you.
Yeah, for sure. And I was excited to be on the tribe with Sharif, which I'm sure is going to be a common theme you hear throughout all these deep dives. But so it was. Um, I was really. Oh, me and Sharif had stayed at Pete's house before the game started, but like Storm, Lauren, Barbara, and like several other people from 10 were there, and then Trevor was there too. So it wasn't like we ever really got a chance to talk about anything.
Mm-hmm.
It was more so them kind of talking about their experiences, and then us kind of talking about the Survivor in general.
Mm-hmm.
But I knew there was potential for me and Sharif to work together, which I'm sure again everyone's going to say that in these deep dives. Yes, I mean, I was just kind of going around making sure I talked to people because that was something in Survival Challenge when we merged. I did not do that first night, and I think that really hurt me.
Mm-hmm.
So I was going to run around, and I remember I was kind of like, there was one point Megan just kind of stayed by the fire, tending the fire, which was kind of her thing. And I just remember I'd been sitting by her for like 5 minutes, and we had just a tad bit of conversation. And I was off talking to someone, and it's super dark at this point. And I just remember Megan going, "Where's Austin?" She was like, "He sat by me for 5 minutes, and I haven't seen you since." And I was like, "Well," so she just like called me out for everyone. So I was like, "Well, time to go back." So I'm back and just going to sat by Megan again. So that was just a little funny moment at the start. But I mean, it was very abundantly clear that it was going to be May or Skylar. They both knew it. At one point, May was like, she was like, "I know it's going to be one of us. Like, it's going to be me. Like, I'd rather, like, the tribal is now. Like, I don't want to sleep out here another night and then go." And I was like, "No," I was like, stick it out. Like, you don't know what's going to happen. Like, maybe we can get a vote on Sky. And then whatever. And so we go to bed that night, and I go sleep on the tarp, and I was going to sleep next to Skylar. And Skylar had a pillow from the reward. And she was like, "Oh, I'll share my pillow with you." And I was like, "Oh, like, I don't know if you want to do that. Apparently, my snoring is terrible and blah, blah, blah." And she was like, "Oh, it'll be fine. I sleep with Jeff every night, so like it can't be any worse than that." And I was like, "No, like I'll use my bag as my pillow. Like if I am that bad, I don't want to be like right in your ear, annoying you." But then sure enough, the next morning she was like, "Oh my God," whoever was our tribe handler at the time, she was like, "Please tell Jeff I'm sorry I never complained about his snoring." It's Austin. But I'm just like still mind blown by this throughout the whole game. But yeah, so then obviously we go to that tribal. May plays her shot in the dark because she knows it's kind of her last resort. So doesn't get it, and then she goes with the majority of the votes. I did vote Skylar that round just because I was like, I can't vote for May. Like, I'm not going to. It's obviously not on the right side of the votes there. But I think it was after that tribal where I started pitching Frank to Sharif and some people. Because back at Blue, I guess this is something I should have talked about. Like I said, Frank was kind of like having your own HGTV out there, watching him run around, build everything. And Amber would just talk about like how awesome she thought Frank was, and which this is what I think is a big strength in my game is that I'm a very good listener in general, but I'll pick up on things. And Amber just like talked about it. She was like, "Oh my God, like I love Frank. He's just like my husband. I've never met anyone like Don," and would just always say these things. And I was like, "Dang, like Amber loves her some Frank." And Frank had talked about Lydia and like wanting to work with her, and I had heard that like they were super close from their season. So there was just these little things. I was kind of like, I was like, I have been working with Frank, but I feel like down the road he's going to have all these options, and those options are going to come before me. So I don't feel good about that because I'm not here to be the good soldier and then get voted out when it's my turn again. So I was kind of like, let me start like pitching it, seeing where people's heads are at. Obviously, I knew Sharif was going to be the kind of the big one to get on board for it to really help pull it off and convince some other people. So I started pitching it to Sharif, and Sharif's like, no, like, don't worry about it. Like I've got it. Like it was like, I've got it. And I remember telling him, I was like, I know like you say you have Lydia, but I don't think that's the case. I said, if Frank and Lydia get together, I think she will choose him over you. Sharif's like, no. I was just like, okay. I said, whatever you say. I was like, but he's got like, these other people over there too. And at first he was kind of like, okay, like we'll think about it, we'll talk. And then at one point I did get Sharif. He was like, yeah. He's like, okay. He's like, maybe. He's like, let me think about it. So that was really when I started priming a Frank vote, or trying to at least.
Little did you know you would be the sole person who voted Frank out at some point. So your next immediate challenge, this is like you're holding up a platform, you're stacking block. No, hold on. This is like the multi-stage ball balancing end of the puzzle, right?
Yeah, I believe so.
Where were you in this challenge?
I was on the puzzle.
What was the puzzle for this?
It was a tanagram.
Okay, how'd it go for you? Oh, I was watching you do this yesterday. It's like a really nasty tangram puzzle too.
Yeah. There's like multiple ways to solve it. So, really, when we talked and we were strategizing, there was no one on our tribe that was really like, I feel great about a tanagram.
I want to go against Josh.
Yeah, like everyone's gonna everyone's gonna puzzles aren't really my thing, or at least not a tanagram. So it was kind of really me and Megan that were like, I'll give it a go. I feel like if I have some time, maybe I can figure it out. For me, that was kind of my big thing. Obviously, I had to wait for the second group to be coming to me to drop the balls off. So really just trying to help them as they got close, and then making sure that they had it lined up right to get it in. Just try to help them and just do it as quickly as possible to give myself more time. Frank was really getting frustrated during that challenge. He had tried to come up with a lot of different hacks for the challenge to get around things. He was getting really frustrated when production was like, "Oh no, you can't do that," as he was doing it instead of telling him beforehand. And then so finally, once we kind of got him calm, they had switched the positions and how they were doing the board. Then they kind of flew through it pretty quickly. I started on the puzzle. And immediately, as soon as I start, the other tribes behind, they're still trying to do their stuff, and Josh just starts chirping at me, which I'm an athlete, so I love it. And I just tried to tune him out because I was I know I'm not the best at this, and if I start chirping back at him, then I'm really not going to be focused. He's going to know he's getting in my head, and then it's just going to get worse from there. Everyone from our tribe screaming because originally I was facing the board this way, and Josh is over here. And so I turn the puzzle, and everyone's like, go on the side, go on the side. Josh is looking, he's gonna like solve it faster once he gets it. So I like scoot over, so I'm like trying to block his view, and I guess he had started to like walk over and was just gonna stand like over my shoulder and look. And Parker told him he couldn't come that close. So apparently he like stood up on the platform and was trying to like look over, and he's just like, oh, that piece doesn't go there. Ooh, I really want to put that piece there, Austin. And I don't know why. I literally just started humming the Shanthum as I was doing it, trying not to freak out, just like, okay, like try different things. So I was literally just sitting there doing the and just like, hurry up, they're coming, and you know what's gonna happen. And then as soon as I heard them say like, Josh, you're good, I was like, uh-oh. And then it was like 30 seconds, I think, and he's like, I'm done. And I was just looking at the puzzle like, well, so I just walked over because I wanted to look at it and see, and I was just like, oh yeah, nope, that wasn't me. Someone from production, I think, said that I was kind of close at one point, that I just need to move like a few pieces, but I mean, my brain just doesn't work that fast.
So how did Corey end up being the one who was targeted this round?
Yeah, so that kind of threw me when we came back and it was Corey. I kind of like was hoping, hey, let's get on board with Frank. My pitch to people was kind of like, hey, like Frank's been getting super, because I think the challenge before that, he was getting frustrated with production too. I was like, look, we lost, like, that energy can kind of bring everybody down. Like, we lost 2 in a row. Like, if he's gonna, and he was like mad at Tam some too, I think. So I was kind of like, like, that's not good for morale. Like, we need to start winning. Blah blah blah. I don't remember what it was. I think maybe I come from a confessional and I went to Sharif. And Sharif's like, all right, it's cool. It's the vote's gonna be between Corey and Skylar, and probably Corey. When once they had left, like, I just kind of was like, okay, like Skylar, you can like fill this role of May for me. I did feel good about her, but I was like, oh, like I don't want to lose Corey. Like that's someone else like I want to work with. So this is where I kind of really started being like, Sharif, are you sure like we shouldn't do Frank? And kind of pushing back on it. And he was like, no, he's like, I understand. He's like, I understand. We'll do Frank next. We'll do Frank next. And I was just like, I really don't want to lose someone that's a potential ally for me in the game. So I was kind of like, well, I was like, it's like between Skylar and Corey, like, I was like, I feel like I'd rather Corey go. But I was like, well, it's like there is a shot in the dark in play for Corey. I was like, so if Corey were to play a shot in the dark, and I throw a vote at Frank, he'll go home. Sharif was actually texting me about this earlier, and I told him I'd get into it. I did tell Corey. I said, Corey, the vote's you, bro. I said, you better go play that shot in the dark and then try one. And Corey was kind of like, really? Like, why is it me? And like what Sharif was telling me was like, we got to get a yellow out. And for me, I'm like, oh, we could have got a yellow out last round and kept May. But obviously, I didn't know that Frank was like one pushing very hard for it to be May. So I was just like, let me just like tell Corey if he plays it, like I think everyone's voting for him. So then like if he gets it, Frank will go. So Corey plays it. I did vote for Frank that round because I knew I had the perfect excuse if it didn't work. And so Skylar knew the vote was her, Corey, so she votes for Corey. And so as they're reading the votes, like obviously Corey's not safe, so it's whatever. Like I forget what order he read it. It was like Corey. Then there was a Skylar vote, and I was like, are we going to split the vote? And then he reads the Frank vote, and then the rest were Corey. So it was 6-1 or 5-1 because Corey didn't vote. So then as we're like walking back to camp, I'm like walking next to Frank, and Frank looks at me like, I got to vote. Like, who voted for me? It was so funny because Skylar was walking 10 feet in front of us, and he was like, I got to vote. me and I went, I was like, she did. I was like, I had to have been Skylar. Like, who else would have voted for Frank? Certainly wasn't me. It was Skylar. Everyone look at Skylar. So yeah, so that was fun. Because I knew that obviously I had that in my back pocket. Just be like, Skylar,
So, any follow up from this vote?
Not really. I don't remember if people were like overly surprised he played the shot in the dark or not. Yeah, I don't feel like there's a lot of fallout from that.
So you go to your next media challenge of the day, and I don't know what this one is. I haven't watched the video, but you also lose this challenge.
Yes.
Is there anything important about this challenge you want to talk about, or you want to talk about strategy about following the challenge?
I honestly don't remember the challenge.
Makes it easy.
So I just remember we lose. We're going back to camp. I want to say it was Megan I was walking with. Someone I was walking with, and they were like, "We're good." Like, I was like, "What are you thinking?" They're like, I know we talked about Frank. Like, are you good with that? And I was like, yes, Frank. It's about time. So we get back to camp. Tribe founder's like, anyone want to do a confessional? I'm like, me. Go down the trail. I'm like, this is great. Like, so and so just said they're on board to do Frank. They were like, I think everyone's on board. So this will be great. It's going to be unanimous. Get Frank out of here. And there's potentially numbers later on for me now. So literally that's all my confession was about. Walk back up the trail, walk straight up to Sharif, and Sharif goes, "It's Skylar." And I was like, "What?" I was like, "What do you mean it's Skylar?" I was like, "I just did a whole confessional about it being Frank." I said, "Now I gotta go back and do it again so I don't look like an idiot." And so me and Sharif were talking, and I know Sharif could tell I was very frustrated. That's honestly probably one of the most frustrated times I've ever had in the game. And I was just like, "Dude, come on! Like you just promised me Frank." And he was like, "I know." He's like, "I know, but we need to get Skylar out. We can't trust her. We can't trust her."
Is there any reason why people felt like they couldn't trust Skylar or wanted her out at that point?
Not that I remember.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the yellow, they thought that she was just kind of a wild card, more of a free agent type, and didn't really have that many allegiances.
Mm-hmm.
So then Sharif was doing the whole, like, "I promise you next time we'll do Frank, I promise you. Very much like Frank said last night, Boston Rob type style of play. And I just remember being like, Storm actually said this at the finale party. He said that was one of his favorite conversations he recorded because I was standing there and I was like, "Dude," I was like, "I'm giving and I'm giving and I'm giving, and you're giving me nothing in return." Mm-hmm. Like, I sacrificed, I didn't sacrifice for before, but I let May go home. Then Corey, even though I tried to stop that. I was like, "You're like promising me this, and you're not giving me anything in return." And he was like, I know. He's like, "But we got to do it. We got to get rid of another yellow. Like, we can't trust her, blah, blah, blah." And it took a lot of me not to blow up. So then I think I had a conversation with Tony at one point about it and expressed my frustration. And then Sharif, Megan, Tony, and I think Carlos all had a conversation with me where I was just like, kind of letting them know, like, where I was, like, like, I've sacrificed 2 allies in a row. Like, I know I can bring Skylar in to, like, work with us. Like, y'all aren't trusting me, type of conversation. And then, they did like hear me out at least, which I did appreciate. And then they were kind of like, "Oh, well, like, maybe we should throw a vote on Frank." And I was like, "Okay, like, that's not what I want to hear. I want to hear everyone vote for him, but take it, I guess." And Sharif was like, "I'll do it." And I was like, I don't know how I feel about that, because I don't know if you're going to follow through with it. But, like, I can't be really too frustrated right now because I don't want things to get flipped on me. So whatever. So I pulled Skylar's. I was like, "Skylar," I was like, "It's you." I was like, "They're voting you." I was like, "I've been trying to get them to do Frank, but they won't." I was like, "Play your shot in the dark. You have to." I was like, "It's our only hope at this point." And she's like, "Okay." She's like, "I will." I was like, I'm pretty sure I told her, I was like, "I'm voting for Frank. Like, I don't care what they're doing." Then as we're walking out of camp to go to tribal, Sharif was like, "Hey, he's like, I know you're like super disappointed about this. Do you want to be the one to cast a vote for Frank?" And I was like, "Hell yeah!" I was like, "I'm gonna vote for him anyways." Uh, he was like, "I know you don't want to vote Scott." I was like, "Yeah." I was like, "Oh, I wasn't voting Scott. I was voting Frank the whole time." So we're walking to tribal. We get there, and I'm just like, "Dear Lord, please let this work." I remember I went up to vote, and I just like wrote Frank down as fast as I could. And I was like, I literally just showed it. I was like, I'm so frustrated. I pray to God this works for Skylar. And I like just threw the ballot in the thing and walked back. So we're sitting there. Parker comes out to read the votes. And Skylar gives him the shot in the dark. He enrolls in. I can't really see it this time. And then he's like, Skylar, you are safe. And Steven, I could have had a heart attack right then and there. I was so excited because I knew what was coming at that point. I was like, it's like, oh my God, like this works. Like it actually works. Twice has worked for me. So then he's reading the votes, and what is it? Six votes.
There's five votes Frank. 5 votes Skylar, 1 vote Frank.
Yeah, so they did 5 votes, don't count. And he goes for the last one, and he was like, 6 person voted out, or whatever it was. And I was just in the Frank, and I could see the shock on Frank's face. I did feel bad because I know that Frank's a great player, but for me, it was like I said, that I knew he had these connections. And I needed him gone to free those up if I was going to have any chance of trying to wiggle my way into these numbers, try to use them for myself, and get myself to the end. So it was just something that I knew I had to do, and it worked out in great fashion for me. Very similarly to Pirate, when we basically had fire tokens, and I bought the letter of marque at the last tribal before merge, and sent Will, who was one of the biggest threats in the game, out, who had turned a lot of my allies.
I was very sad about that.
Yeah. See, I scooped up his allies.
Most likely, honestly, if Will was still in the game, I would have been with him more than you.
Yeah. See? I know who to take out. But yeah, so that was just like kind of a sigh of relief moment for me. Like, okay, I very much know that like there definitely takes some luck to win every time in Survivor. So I was like, all right, like luck's on my side so far. It's worked out for me twice.
Any follow-up returning to camp after that?
We got back to camp. Sharif was like very clearly disappointed about it. Even before that, when I was pitching Frank for that vote, and I was still going on with Frank and Lydia, like, we don't have these people. They're going to choose Frank over you. So, they were disappointed, but they're like, it's the game. Like, they were happy for Skylar because, like, obviously it's such a cool moment. They know that she wanted to be there really bad. But for them, like, it was kind of a detriment to their game at that point. So they were disappointed, but I mean, I wasn't like anyone who was like pissed off about it.
Well, at your next immunity challenge, there was a big reaction to seeing Frank get voted out.
Yeah, that was where the real fallout happened. That was the other time seeing Frank was out. So I remember we were walking in. They turned and looked at us, and I just think, I don't know if I'll ever forget it. Amber was on the far side of the mat, and she made a beeline to the outside of the mat. And I was walking at the front of our tribe, and I saw her coming, and I was like, don't look at her. I will tell her I was the one that did it, but not right now, because she is clearly this. And I just like saw her coming, and as she got to the edge, I was like, don't make eye contact. But I saw her mouth. She's standing there, like, hands on hip, like, who did it? And I was just kind of like, whoop. I wonder who did that. And then they started talking about the challenge, and next thing I know, I look over and I see Lydia's like crouched down, and I'm like, is this girl crying right now? And so I just kind of like ignored it, kind of like went back to see him talking about the challenge, and I looked back over, and then I think it was Taylor was like rubbing her back, and I was like, oh my God, out that Doja was crying because Frank's out. So now I'm like, oh, this is all the validation I need. So now I'm standing here looking at Sharif like, excuse me, sir. Like, did I tell you or did I tell you? Like she's reacting like that to him going home. One second, I need to plug this in before it dies.
Yeah. Thank you. I've had other interviews where people are on their phone and their phone dies because I talk too much with them.
Yeah.
So good call.
Like, I love Lydia. Like, obviously didn't get to play in the game with her, but like we've talked a decent amount since the game. I love Lydia to death. So I feel bad I had to add her to the liberals I've made cry in my life. But I think that was probably the most validating one I've had because I was just wanting to stare a hole through Sharif and be like, I told you. And which me and Lydia have talked about this whole dynamic. And turns out I was kind of wrong. She would have chosen Sharif over Frank. I'm sure she would talk about that in hers. But she told me she was looking forward to telling me on the comments that I was wrong about my assumption. But in the moment, like it's got to be pretty convincing to Sharif. And even when we got back to camp after the challenge, she was like, that was very eye opening. I was very shocking to see that she was that distraught about it.
Well, you also win your first immunity challenge on this tribe, and ending your 4 tribal councils in a row. You almost had a 5 streak. I'm sorry. You were not the person who wins the most pre-merge tribal councils, unfortunately. I think Carlos and Tony and Sharif get that award.
Yeah, they beat me out on that, which is fine. But yeah, no, we won that challenge. Obviously, part of that was luck, just guessing right, going out there because there wasn't even questions. It was just open the thing, and if your color was in it, just grab it and come back. So we lucked out. We lucked out that also yellow really screwed up at the beginning on the furthest one out. Brent didn't get it right. He came back and Reynolds went to run. And Brent told him, I think the same one that he opened was the one that Reynolds should do. Mm-hmm. So then Reynolds got it wrong. So they had to run all the way out there again. So they really shot themselves in the foot to start. Mm-hmm. We were fortunate that we got those pretty much right. I think we only had 2 people that had to run the second time. And those were ones that were close, so it wasn't a big deal. Originally going into that challenge, they told us that there was going to be one person that needed to be in the water. It wasn't going to be very deep. But yeah, so originally I was going to be in it. And then they were like, oh, like when you get to the end, you're going to have to shoot like it's basketball. And I was like, oh no, like I'm a basketball player. Like I don't want to be in the water. Let me shoot, especially from the far one. So then Tony, I believe, was the one that switched with me and said he would get in the water because he was like, I don't really feel like comfortable doing the shooting. So we did that. We get down there. I think Skylar made hers from the closest one pretty quickly. Megan and Carlos made theirs fairly quickly. Sharif's was a little bit longer, but obviously it's the furthest one back, and those are just little inflatable balls, so it's super hard. But I knew I wanted to go last in that because I was like, I know I'm going to make mine pretty quickly. So Sharif makes his. Yellow's still not even down here shooting. So I'm like, I know, this challenge is over. I was like, well, let me just nail in the coffin. We're doing this in one shot. So literally set my feet, shooting motion, just like I'm warming up for a game. Shoot it first time, make it. And honestly, one of my favorite moments I've ever had, as it goes in, I just heard, and me and Sharif just both flex and are just screaming at each other like we just won the NBA finals or something. Because we had just been beaten down, losing 3 challenges in a row. Mm-hmm. So that was one of the best feelings I've ever had, maybe in a game. And I'll never forget that moment. Me and Sharif even talked about outside the game. It was just so funny, that moment of us just looking at each other right in the eyes, flexing and screaming, and then just hugging each other.
Because I think Sharif had done this challenge this previous season too, and I
Yes,
remember
they had
that
done it
challenge was a
before.
brutal one that took a long time.
Yeah, and they had done it. They didn't have like the shooting down by the water though.
Yeah.
I remember is what it said. But yeah, so that one was a lot of fun. And then obviously we were getting food too for winning. Um, so that was just kind of like the icing on the cake for us. And I think was that the last challenge that day?
That was the last challenge that day. Lydia
Yeah.
would go, uh, Achila would go to the tribal council and vote out Lydia. Or rather, Lydia would be idled out by Brent. Um, so how was that evening back at the Kalani camp?
Oh, it was so good. We walked back to camp, which our camp was it was further than the Sheila camp was. So we had to walk all the way back there. All those times after losing it was just terrible. But this time we had a plate of food. Uh, we had 2 plates of chicken spaghetti. And so we went. We were like, you know what? Like we don't want to go down to camp to eat. Like we're gonna stay out here in the open field where it's still like lighter out. Because like once it starts getting dark and you like go back in the woods, it's a lot darker down there
Yep.
than it is where it's out in the open field. So we just like stayed out there. We all just kind of sat in the grass and ate. And, that was just a really like cool moment of us just being like such a sigh of relief. Um, for me, I'm like, yes, like Skylar's still here. She's still protected. Like this is awesome. This is exactly what I wanted to happen.
So your tribe is now to 6 people, right? So it's you, Skylar, Sharif, Tony, Carlos, Megan. Can you rank the players in terms of importance to your game at that point?
Um, what was the game at that point? I mean, Skylar would have been one just because I knew like I couldn't lose her.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, like I needed her in the game, especially long term. So Skylar would have to be number one. Um, I want to say Sharif at 2, but I feel like at that point I was also kind of like, okay, like Sharif, I don't see myself in Sharif's long term plans.
Mm-hmm.
So as much as I wanted to be like more important, he just wasn't at that point. I think at that point was really when I tried starting to work on Tony
Mm-hmm.
and being like, all right, like, let's get something going here. I've tried with Sharif from Red, and that's not working. Maybe pull Tony or something. Um, so I'd say Tony was probably 2. Um, Megan was probably 3 at that point because I knew that she was going to be a force come merge. I knew she was a quieter player, but you can, like Todd was saying in his deep dive, like when you talk to Megan, like she listens and then she'll like give you her points of view from her perspective, and you're kind of like, oh wow, like, yeah, that is a good point. So she's someone that initially you're like, oh wow, let's go quiet. She doesn't talk a lot, but once you do get to that point with her where she's comfortable having those conversations with you, you really kind of bounce things around with her. So she was probably 3. Her and Carlos were probably like 3A, 3B. So I felt like they were both important. I knew that Tony and Carlos were close. So another reason I was trying to get in with Tony, I figured that could help me get in with Carlos a little bit more. Yeah, I guess that's kind of where everybody was.
Yeah, because it's interesting. 'Cause I haven't heard you talk about Carlos and Tony that much before now, but it sounds like there were 2 players you were actually identifying and saying, I need to be working with these 2.
Yeah, so they were, and which actually, like, it was kind of starting at that point where I was really trying to get with them and trying to create some kind of Final Four or pitching a Final Four of me, Skylar, Tony, Carlos.
Mm-hmm.
Being like, like, it might be people that on our original tribes, people wouldn't assume us necessarily being the biggest, like, out there players. But I feel like we could all kind of work together and go different routes to get information and come back and work together. So that was kind of where that went, which is actually funny. And it becomes more ironic later with Tony, because once they had like told us the cast, like put us in the group, and people were messaging, I think me and Tony had exchanged just like 3 messages, like glad to see you playing, like I figured you'd be there. It's gonna be a lot of fun. Just like just little small talk that we always start with.
Mm-hmm.
And then Tony sent me a message that like I was like red flags, like I'm not gonna be able to work with Tony in this game. he said, yeah, I was so intimidated by you when you showed up during season 8. He's like, because you just showed up and everyone was like, oh my God, I love this guy, I love Austin. And he basically saying he was intimidated by how likable I was before the game even started. I remember telling people, I was like, dude, like, this guy's like probably already trying to put a target on my back.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it is ironic that Tony was someone that became, at certain points, someone that I thought was very crucial for my game, someone that I thought I could pull over to my side.
So so you go to sleep. Next day, day 5, you're down to 14 players. How soon do you expect the merge to become? You think this is going to be like a large merge? They're going to whittle you down to the core? Like, what do you think is going to happen that day?
So I was thinking 1 or 2 more votes max before a merge. So I was expecting it soon. And then obviously we get there and it's everyone drop your buffs.
You got to earn it.
Yeah, you got to earn it. And that's when I was really like, I was like, Parker's all in on the new era. Like, we're doing everything they do. So obviously we're standing there. Again, I want to make sure I'm the last person gone because Fate's going to decide where I am. If that means I'm stuck on the memory, which I'm not going to be good at, so be it. So yeah, memory was not what I wanted to do. My order of preference was the beanbags. This one because I'd won it before. And also we didn't have to bounce the ball on it like we did in Pirate.
Yeah, that was the worst part of the Pirate. It's like I was so shaking I couldn't get the ball to balance, and it was such a disaster.
Yeah. So I was like, that one probably wouldn't be too bad either. I was like, with memory, don't do well in those. Don't want to have to do that. But I think I got 11th in the drawing, so I was kind of like, oof, there were 6 spots at the beanbag, so I was kind of like, those are probably gonna be gone fast. But then I saw who was in front of me, and I was like, these are smarter people, and Carly's I want to do memory. Skylar's I want to do memory. Todd's I want to do the endurance and all that stuff. And then it's getting there, and then it got to a point where I was like, I'm going to get to do beanbags. This is great. So we go down there. They explain it to us. You got to land all 3 beanbags at once, or you just have to first 3 to land all the 3 beanbags. Safe. Moving on to the merge. So I'm sitting there, and I'm like, I'm not going to sit here and throw these bags individually. I'm throwing all 3 at once and hoping they stick. I'm like, they haven't said we couldn't do it, but I'm not going to ask because I don't want to give anyone else the idea. Mm-hmm. So I'm standing there and I'm looking down the line to see if anyone's thinking the way I am. And I see every person has 1 bag in their throwing hand and then 2 in their other hand, except for Josh. So Josh standing there with all 3 in his right hand too, just like me. And I was like, okay, me and Josh are both doing the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
We might just both get it really quick. So he told us to go. I throw them. And as soon as I threw them, I said, oh, no, none of those are landing. I was like, I'm screwed. Because that was my biggest thing. I was like, if I don't land all 3 at once, I could be in trouble when other people are just throwing them one at a time. And Josh landed all 3 of those. So I was like, crap. So I'm booking it. I think I got 2 the next time. And my 3rd one went off. So I went back. Got the 3rd one, came back, and I landed it on my 3rd time throwing. So I think me and Josh were the first 2, and then Sharif got his as well. So we were the first ones done. So then they took us inside, put us on the couch, and the 3 of us got to talk. Well, that was kind of a great scenario that Josh had talked about a little bit when I was telling him to play the shot in the dark. If we could get with Sharif, the 3 of us, I feel like we'd probably work together. And me and Sharif kind of talked about as well. So now all 3 of us are together. We get to talk. So we're just sitting there on the couch inside waiting for the other challenges to finish. And we're talking about working together. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is great. I feel like I'm in a really good spot now. The game's turning in my favor is how I was feeling. Then obviously the other challenge finishes. And then we get the winners get to go to where Sheila was. Mm-hmm. And just wait for them to get us for after that tribal council.
So what happened in that waiting period? Was there a lot of strategizing? Was anyone you're getting to know? Because you're seeing, really, Carly and Todd are the 2 new people for you at this point, right?
Yeah. So I was really excited to get to talk to Todd. Carly is funny because we're both really good friends with Sam Lechner, so like I knew that like coming in that we had that in common. Um, so kind of got a chance to talk to Carly. I feel like a lot of us just kind of like we mainly just kind of sat around together. No one really went off by themselves during that waiting period. Um, but I was just kind of talking about it, speculating who was going to go home. Is there anyone we wanted to see go home? And then talking about, I think we talked a little bit about the Frank vote just because Todd was there um, and things like that. But nothing too crazy that I remember.
Did you have any expectations who'd be voted out of the loser tribe or the losing group?
I think we all kind of assumed it would be Brent because there was such a lot of the people from the loser tribe had just tried to vote him out. And he had played his idol, so I think most of us were kind of like, it's probably going to be him, just because going into the merge, everyone was like, he's going to be a big threat.
Yep. Well, so Brent is voted out. Your tribe is now merged. Looking at this group as a whole, did you see clear battle lines? Or you're just like, I don't know where this is going to go?
Well, so we go, and once we got together...
Oh, you also get a merge piece, not
Yes.
Applebee's.
Well, we got a merge food. I don't know if you call it a feast, but I mean, in season 4, we got like a huge like taco bar reward, banana pudding, and all this stuff. Did not sit well on the stomach. So I mean, I guess it wasn't too bad. I mean, it was enough to like take care of the hunger cravings and hold you over for a little bit, but definitely nothing like I'm used to seeing in the games for merge feast. But I mean, I love Zaxby's. We don't have it here in Texas. We have it back home in Florida. So I was more than happy to have some French fries dipped in Zax sauce, some chicken wings, and some chicken tenders. So I wasn't, and a little bit of salad. So it was, and a Gatorade to wash it all down. So it was pretty solid. It was good for me.
Anything you want to talk about? Any strategy was going on at the start of merge, or anyone you're meeting for the first time talking to, or do you want to kind of go to the first immunity challenge?
I guess I was meeting Taylor for the first time in person, which my ACL buddy, obviously everyone knows she tore hers during Reelfoot. I've just torn mine playing basketball in my life. But that's like I had reached out to Taylor after her season, just kind of being like, hey, like I know this sucks. Like if you ever need to talk, you need someone to listen. Like I know what it's like. Been through it twice. Like I'm here for it. So we had like always kind of talked about it. And then I think it may have been like after the merge feast and like after like we kind of set up a camp and stuff. I'm laying in the shelter talking to Taylor. I think Carly, and we were like talking about the ACLs, like how we did it, like recovery, yada yada yada. And I don't know, like I definitely had more brain fog this game than I ever have before in a game. I literally sat there, like me and Taylor have talked about this so many times before outside the game. And I literally look at Taylor and I go, how'd you tear yours again? And she just looked at me like, are you stupid? She was like, Reelfoot? And I was like, oh my God. I was like, yeah, it's like, not that.
The food is not enough. I need more.
yeah, apparently it wasn't. But that was just a little funny moment. So, yeah, I feel like she may have really only been the person I was meeting for the first time.
Yeah. You'd met Adam at your tribe on day 2, and you met Todd and Carly, just kind of waiting around the winner's side, and
So that was really the only person I had.
You have the first immunity challenge. Todd and Josh win, and that evening, life happens, and Taylor doesn't ask to leave the game, but asks to be voted out from the game.
Right. Yeah. So she asked to be voted out. Obviously, we didn't know the situation or scenario at that time. I think the tribal was supposed to be in the morning. So we were just like, oh, like, you know what? We'll just do it right now. Like, let's go with you. Let's go with Parker. So we go to the tribal. Parker still kind of runs it like a normal tribal, asking a few questions. Then we just get to the vote, and Parker comes out, reads the votes, and it's like all Taylor, and then there's a Hiki Skylar vote in there. And at first I'm like, oh, like Taylor had to vote for somebody, like whatever, that's who she voted for. But then she did like a no vote or something.
Yeah, she
parchment.
She like miscast her vote as not safe.
Yeah. And so then it was kind of like, oh, like, who's trying to stir the pot here and the merge with this, doing that. And then so obviously Skylar just hated after that happened. So it was just kind of like, oh boy, here we go. Yeah, but then also we had found out from the merge, the losers tribal, those that didn't earn their way into the merge, that Taylor had stood up in that tribal and said that she would never vote Reynolds out or something along those lines, some dynamic like that. I don't know if Amber was involved in that too, or if it was just Taylor, but that kind of was like, everyone was like, oh, like, that's a solid 3. They need to be broken up. So for me, it was just kind of like, okay, like, Taylor has to leave because of these personal reasons. And then, like, we'll see where things go from here. I feel like I had the best understanding of the potential that Reynolds and Amber had together, of what they could do and how they can cause chaos. And, they're both players that can feed off of that chaos in creating it. I feel like I thrive off chaos, but more so in the background. Like if I'm creating it, it's not good for me. I wish I could do that from time to time, but that's just not like how I can play the game. I don't have issues with it. I mean, if it works for you, more power to you. So I felt like I was the only one that knew like what the kind of like potential nuclear capabilities that duo was a part of, or could potentially bring to the table.
So, does anything else of note happen that night after tribal council?
I don't think so. I think it was pretty simple. Everyone kind of went back to camp, just kind of got situated, went to bed for the night. And Amber loved using me for warmth for the game, but she also hated my snoring. So Amber got her furnace back to keep her warm.
So the next morning you have your second community challenge, and this is a counting object challenge. They bring out a jar or something, and the players have to guess what it is, and you win this challenge along with Skylar.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I was very shocked by the performance of other people in the challenge. I remember the first one was Swedish Fish, and they brought it out. And, like, I've done these. Like, I worked at a radio station before, so, like, we've done them as contests at various events. I did them in, like, church youth group growing up all the time. Was, like, never, like, was close. So I was like, okay, like, just go up there, like, count, like, find a row that's, like, somewhat even across, count across, and then find a row going down that's, like, also somewhat even, and just count, and then just, like, multiply that by, like, just the number, count the number of rows, and just, like, multiply that, and then just, like, add a bigger number on top of it, because, like, it's always more than you think it is. So I just run back, don't remember what I put. It's like 200 something, I think. And then Parker goes to check our answers, and I think the first person to check is like Carly or Carlos, and they put like 80. And I was like, where in the world did you get 80 from on this? And then he's like going around, and people are like 100, like 150. And I'm like, dude, like, these people, I put like 2 something. And I was just like, it's like Swedish Fish, a little bit longer, bigger. So I was like, oh, like, am I really that bad at these? Like, I'm that far off. And I ended up being the closest on the first one. So I was kind of like, okay, like, strategy kind of worked, I guess. So I can't remember if it was the marshmallows. I think it was marshmallows or the M&Ms they brought out next. So I was like, all right, just do the same thing. Ran back up there. I knew they were smaller, but the jar was also a little bit smaller. But I was like, there's still going to be a lot more. So I think I guess like 400 something. Again, they did the answers because I thought they were doing like 2 by 2 or whatever. But I just remember I got it. And I think I was the closest one again. Because it didn't matter if you were over or below, which is closest. Yeah, so I got that one. And then it was me, Skylar, and Sharif, I think, were the last 3. Go up there, did the same formula I have been doing. Come back. I started to put 650, and then I changed it to 675 in the last minute. Parker goes, checks the answer, and he's like, Sharif. And Sharif had put 650, so I was like, oh, this is interesting. Goes to me, I'm like 675, and he goes to Skylar, and Skylar also had 675. So I was like, oh, like this is great. Like as long as it's like, I was like, it's at least a tie. We'll get a tiebreaker between me and Skylar, worst case scenario. And then it was like 678. So we were only like 3 off. And I was like, dang, that's pretty cool. So that one, I mean, that was just kind of like a crapshoot. I feel like if you're just good at guessing, understanding.
Or you've been training for your entire life about looking at a radio station?
I've literally never done the counting thing before. I remember running up there looking at it like, we'll do this, sure. And then just throwing a bigger number on top of what I tried to math out. But yeah, so that was my first Reelfoot immunity win.
How did it feel?
It felt pretty good because I knew in 4 the challenge when I got voted out was the endurance one with the arm tied to the bucket, and I knew I was going to get voted out if I didn't win. I think I was the second person out of that challenge. Obviously, didn't feel like I was going to be voted out, but knowing that I got one, that was a big thing I wanted to do was win an individual challenge this season. So just getting that, no matter what way it was, it felt good. And then to get it with Skylar, the two of us, that was a lot of fun as well.
So, talk to me about the strategy here, because from looking at just the votes, Josh ends up being a pretty unanimous vote.
Yeah, he was.
And you cast your vote for Amber this round. And so walk me through what happens as you get back to camp and the strategy's underway.
Yeah, so we get back to camp. And no one's really talking to Amber and Reynolds. Like they're like just standing there talking to each other. No one's going to them. They're like vocalizing that no one's talking to them. I'm going to, everyone's like, yeah, like we're just going to split the vote between them. We'll go 5 and 5. One of them plays an idol, shot in the dark. That looked good. And then Sharif came up to me at one point and was like, are you good to vote Amber? And I was like, yeah, I'll vote Amber. Like when people would ask me what I was thinking, I was like, everything I'm hearing is we're splitting the vote. I was like, I think that's kind of everyone's plan. Split the two of them up, whichever one stays. That's when like sides are going to try to scoop them up, pull them in, and then that's when the war is going to start. People are going to start taking shots. So I guess I was just naive to the fact of not thinking ahead like everybody else was.
Josh is a quote who says, I still laugh at Austin being left out of the vote 10-1 because we were talking about basketball maybe one time.
Yeah, and it was like, couldn't have been no more than 10 minutes before we left for tribal that this conversation started. And was honestly the longest conversation that Josh and I had the entire game. We were just chopping it up about basketball, the NBA, different players and stuff. And I wasn't thinking anything of it. I love basketball. I'll talk basketball all day with anybody that wants to. So we were just standing there talking, and then they're like, all right, let's go to tribal. So we're going. I'm like, all right, this is going to be pretty straightforward. We'll see if one of them plays something. Then the other goes home. I was like, but be prepared because the war starts after this round. Mm-hmm. So we're sitting there. We got the tribal. I'm just chilling. And Parker comes out, pulls the votes out, and he's like, Reynolds, he's like Reynolds, Amber, Josh. And I'm like, okay, they voted for Josh. And he's like, 2 votes, Josh. And I'm like, okay, there's Amber and Reynolds votes. We're cool. And I was like, Josh. He's like, 3 votes. I was like, who voted with them? And he's like, 4 votes, Josh. I'm just kind of like, what? He's like, 5 votes, Josh. And I think it was the 6th one where he was like, next person voted out. And I was just kind of like, what the just happened? I've never been blindsided like that before. And Pyre, when I had people flip on me, I was kind of wary of it. Mm-hmm. But never been left out of a vote that bad. I think the one in Pirate, was the second closest. It was a 4-3 or 5-3 vote or something. It mm-hmm. wasn't a complete I'm left out. But I didn't even realize I was the only person left out of the vote because I'm like, okay, there's a vote for Reynolds, there's a vote for Amber. Obviously, I was just so mind blown by what happened. I'm like, someone else got left out of this vote. Mm-hmm. They didn't send us back to camp. They just had us wait by the barn. So I'm just looking around at people, and I think while we were sitting on the stump, so I was thinking at people, I was like, did you know? And they were like, yeah. And so we're waiting by the barn. I'm walking up to everyone. I'm like, did you know? Did you know? Did you? So I'm like, who was left out? I gotta find this person.
Skylar even knew.
Yeah, Skylar. So I'm like, who the fuck who did this? So I'm like, going, I couldn't process it. And I go up to Todd and I'm like, did you know about this? And he's like, yeah, I knew. He's like, I think it was more so about just like keeping the information close and not letting it get out so he would find out about it and play something. And then I kind of stood back and I was like, going through it again. And I was like, wait, I was like, it was like 10-1-1. I was like, I voted Amber. I was like, who voted Reynolds? And I was like, oh, duh. I was like, Josh didn't vote for himself. I was like, he didn't. I was like, a shot in the dark's gone. I was like, oh my God. I was like, I was the only person like out. So then I just go and kind of sit down and I'm like processing it. And like, I went and talked to some more people and I was like, in which I understood it completely. I was like, I get it. Like, no one, like, there's a puzzle. No one wants to go against them, which ironically, I don't think there was a single puzzle in the entire merge phase.
Final four.
Well, that's why I was just like, this is so weird. Like, I don't understand. I was like, I don't understand why I was left out of the vote was my big thing too. And it may have been Sharif came to me and was like, oh, like, we didn't tell you because like you and Josh were so close. And I was like, huh? They're like, yeah, like you and Josh were like super tight. And I was like, said who? I was like, I told the dude he was getting the votes at the first tribal to play his shot in the dark. I was like, but I haven't been with him until last night. But like, we haven't really talked. I was like, and I even said, I was like, we talked about basketball for like 10 minutes, but that was it. And so like, obviously this plan had been in place. So I was like, I gotta regroup fast.
Mm-hmm.
So that was kind of the fallout from my best friend in the entire world being voted out.
Yeah. Sharif says there's worries you might tell Josh and that there was a chance he had a hidden immunity idol.
Yeah, and so again, I was kind of just going off the whole basis that everyone thought that me and him were so close. I don't think I would have told him. Pretty confident he didn't have an idol. I knew his shot in the dark was gone. So I mean, if people had told me, I probably would have been like, oh, okay. But in the long term, I think that really benefited me with Josh going and me being left out because, like I said, I knew what Reynolds and Amber were capable of together. And I knew that they were super close. So I was like, I was wanting to work with one of them, not necessarily two of them. But then I kind of knew at that point, like they were just being used, like they were being protected in that vote to get Josh out. So honestly, I felt like I was forced to go play with them at that point. So I think we did that next challenge.
It was the slingshot challenge.
Yes, which I had a slingshot as a kid for a little bit. And I was pretty young, so it's been a while since I shot one. But I expected to do like way better than that. Like, I mean, the shooting part was easy, right? Easiest for me. It was more so just the accuracy. And it was getting embarrassing every time they scooted the platform up and we still weren't getting it. I think Sharif probably had a 45-minute wait before somebody else joined him as a winner. And poor Reynolds, I think he hit 3 different tiles that broke probably 48%, and you needed 50% to break. And then finally, it was just so close that I was like, I can't miss from this distance. And I was able to get my second one in a row, which obviously then I feel ecstatic because I'm like, at that point, I'm like, am I next? Like, oh, I'm the only one out of the vote. So am I next? So now, like, if I am, like, that screws everyone's plans up. We'll see another day. Yeah, so I remember we won, and we were walking back to camp, and people were kind of strategizing, and no one's really talking to Amber and Reynolds again. So then I kind of go up to them, and I kind of felt like the kid that gets caught by mom and dad doing something you weren't supposed to be, that they told you not to. It was kind of like they were just like waiting for me, and I come back like, "Hi, I'm back. Like, do you want to work together?" Like, I don't feel like I have any options at this point. But, or no, I don't think we went back to camp, actually, because we were by the barn. Yeah, we were by the barn, so maybe it was after this tribal where I did that. Or maybe it was they were at the barn and no one was talking to them. So everyone's kind of running around, and again, everyone was kind of like, okay, like this is when it's going to be Amber or Reynolds. But then I think 7 of the 11 names got thrown out, like at some point during that scramble, and you could just tell it was going to be all over the place. And so I'm trying to figure out, okay, who can I trust? Like, who's someone that maybe feels like they're on the bottom of something, or they're just looking for allies and that I can pull in. Obviously, I knew I had Skylar, even though she was the ringleader, it turns out, of that Josh vote, or at least leaving me out of it, is what I was told. So like, okay, I got to get Skylar. Like, Amber Reynolds, like, I got to work with them at least for this round and try to, like, get some footing back in the game.
Mm-hmm.
Then Carly was kind of, like, there to be like, okay, like, she's definitely down to make something happen. Who all's there? So I think it was me, Amber Reynolds, Skylar, and Carly. So like, I'm trying to figure out a plan. People are throwing names out. It's getting changed. And I remember at one point I was like, I really don't have that close of a relationship with Megan at this point. Like, what do y'all think about doing Megan? Because there was already talk of if Megan makes it to the end of the game, she's going to win. She's going to win a lot of challenges. Mm-hmm. So it's like, y'all down for Megan? And they were like, hell yeah, we're down. Let's do it. So like, okay, I was like, we need one more vote though. So I was like, just looking around, and I was like, I got to like take a shot with Adam now. Bring Adam in, like, see if the work I put in, that little bit of camp, like, has potential to build something further. So talk to Adam, throw Megan's name out to him, and he's like, yeah, I'm on board. So I'm like, okay, cool. Literally takes like 5 steps to Megan, and I hear him say, they're voting for you. And I was like, well, that plan's in shambles now. So I go back and I said, I told him, he said he was on board. And I heard him tell Megan that the vote's her. I was like, so we got to change the plan. I was like, do y'all want to, like, so everyone's just like, well, what do we do? And like, it seemed like everyone's going to get down. And I was like, you know what? I was like, screw this. I was like, can we vote Adam? I was like, does anyone have an issue with that? I was like, he's like leaking a lot of information to people. I was like, so like, what if we can get him out? And everyone was like, sure, we're on board. Let's do it. And so we go into that tribal, and I think Reynolds played an idol.
I haven't filled this out yet. I just know there's an idol played, and Adam goes home.
It was Reynolds, or I'm pretty sure it was Reynolds.
Yeah, because both Reynolds and Amber have idols at this point.
Yeah, so Reynolds plays an idol, I'm pretty sure, and obviously cancels all his votes, and then Adam ends up going home, and that was just such a relief for me, because I was like, okay, like, I feel like I have some people, like, there's trust there now. I have people I work with. I don't have to feel like I'm on the bottom. But I also feel like I saw the game kind of opening up at that point. Okay, cool. At that point, I kind of saw the game opening up. I actually didn't talk about this. The night of the merge, when we were sitting at camp, I distinctly remember sitting there, like, in the dark, like, obviously the firestones you can kind of see. And I remember, like, watching people, and I was like, I don't see anyone, like, winning this game. Like, I don't see any of these people as being the person who wins this game. I feel like I can win, but I just don't see any of these people winning. And another thing I forgot to mention, when we voted Taylor out, she kind of gave a hug and I guess whispered some like motivational words or just some words to everybody as she was leaving. When she gave me a hug, which I didn't know she was doing that until she gave me a hug. And she was like, don't let anybody underestimate you. I know you can win this game. Mm-hmm. So that was like a big confidence boost for me. So I remember, I think it was that night that I was like, I don't see it. I just don't see it happen. Anyone else winning this game. Like, I know it sounds cocky and arrogant, and I can't get too far ahead of myself, but I just don't see any of these people winning the game except for me. Well, then, yeah, so then flash forward back to Adam going home, and that's when I was really like, okay, like, I see the game breaking open now. I see, like, a path for me to maneuver my way to the end. Like, I feel really good about my spot in the game right now.
So it really feels like you have two alliances that have kind of just solidified and started clashing, and we're going to see more of these clashes these next 2 rounds, because you go to your next immunity challenge, Carly and Reynolds win immunity, and what happens and like the votes are going to end up being, it's going to be like split on Skylar and I can't remember who else, but how did the strategy evolve for this round?
Yeah, so at this point it's final 10. and we're split right down the middle, 5-5.
Oh, this is where Megan plays the idol and Todd and says like, I think she's like Tony, Carlos, Todd, and one other person whose name I'm forgetting.
Tony.
Sharif. We're Final Five, we're doing this, and she plays the idol for Todd. Right?
Yeah. So this is kind of where I made another misstep in the game. Because we had kind of like had talks like, oh, we're split right down the middle at 10. Like, this has been such an iconic season. Like, what better way than like the season has to have a rock draw at some point now. Like, Shot in the Dark's played, we've had multiple idols played successfully. Like, we're going to rocks. Like, everybody put your big boy pants on, nut up. Like, we're going to rocks.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me at that point in the game, like, again, like I said, I felt like after the Josh vote, like I was kind of, my hand was forced to go work with Amber, Reynolds, Carly, and Skylar. And so Skylar was a, like, ride or die. Like, I was protecting her no matter what. Like, that was a ship that I was willing to sink with and die on. So we go into go back to camp, we're strategizing. I felt like votes were going on me.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, you know what? Like, if I go down, like, I'm going down swinging. I had been working on Tony still throughout the entire merge, trying to build something with him. Even Todd, kind of early in the merge, I tried to start building something with him because I knew Todd was an important player for me to get in with. We hadn't really talked about the Megan stuff yet, but I was really, like, me, him, and Megan being the final three, but I was like, I know, like, Todd's a key for me. I was like, I don't know why, but he's a key person for me to get with in this game. Mm-hmm. So I'd been working on that. I'd been working Tony. I'd still, like, multiple times pitched this Final Four. Me, Skylar, Tony, Carlos. It's kind of like maybe the quote-unquote underdogs from our tribes, kind of teaming up and making it to the end together. So we're at camp or whatever, and I see Tony and Sharif talking, I think. Sharif leaves. I'm like, okay, I need to, like, I was like, I think I can get Tony. I think Tony's ready to make a move, do something to, like, put his stamp on the game, like, but it'll also benefit me. So, like, this is key. And I think the five, me, Reynolds, Amber, Skylar, and Carly were talking, and I was like, I can get Tony. I can get Tony to flip. He's not gonna, I don't think he wants to go to Rockstar. I think I can get him. And they were like, no, like, don't trust him. Don't trust him. And I'm like, no, like, I can trust him. Like, I feel like I can. And again, so ironic looking back at the message she had sent me before the game where I was like, I can't trust this dude at all. And now I'm like, you know what? And I told them, the five or the other four, I said, I'm pretty sure I'm the one getting votes. I said, so I'm willing to stick my neck out and put it on the line, putting my trust in Tony. Mm-hmm. Like, if I thought it was someone else, especially if I thought it was Skylar, I probably would have been less hesitant to go to him and give him so much information. Because I was like, you know what? Like, if I go home on this, so be it. That's how it plays out. Mm-hmm. But, like, I've got to do something here. Mm-hmm. So I go, I believe this was when Tony was having kind of this breakdown. He was crying, so just kind of gave him a hug. Because me and him did have, like, a pretty good personal relationship, even though the game working relationship wasn't quite there yet. So gave him a hug, just tried to, like, calm him down. And then we talked, and I was like, Tony, come on. And he said he felt like Sharif and maybe Todd and Megan, like, just weren't listening to him and valuing his opinion. And I was like, dude, this is what I've been telling you the whole time. You and me, like, work together 50-50. I will hear you out on everything. I'm never going to come to you and say, this is the way the vote's going to be. This is what we're doing. That's it. And so he was just like, he was asking me, like, where we were voting. And I was, like, come with us, like, vote Todd, like, I'll go home. So I think he was like, is it Megan or Todd? And I was like, it's Todd. Like, I was like, they don't want me to tell you this, but, like, I'm just giving you the trust. It's Todd. And vote with us, and, like, what was that? And so I felt good about it. I was like, yeah, like, I think I got him. I think all my work, Tony is finally paid off, but this is going to be great. It's going to work out in my favor. On the revote, Todd will go home. So we get to tribal, go through everything. Bart brings votes out, asks if anyone has an idol. Megan stands up, goes to play it. And she starts talking, and I'm like, just play the damn thing for yourself, please. And she was like, I'm not going to play this for myself. And as soon as she said that, my heart just sank. So I was like, oh no. I was like, I've been bamboozled. uh, and so she's like, I'm playing it for Todd. And I was just like, well, it's like, go ahead, Parker. I said, say these don't count and show me my name. Like, I think I maybe like already like put a hand on my bag or something. Uh, and I was just kind of like sitting there, like through the does not count, just waiting to see an Austin vote. And I remember he flipped that vote over, and I think it said Sky, and I was just like, my jaw just dropped, and my heart sank even further because I was just like, oh no, I was like, what have I done? Like at that point, Skylar was like I've said it many times. Skylar's like a little sister to me now, and I knew how much it meant to her coming back and proving to Jeff and to Damien that like she was a good player and she wanted to like represent. And she had been doing so well, was just killing at the game, and I was like, this is all my fault, and so that was just heartbreaking for me because I was like fully expecting like I'm putting the stress on this person because I'm going home if it doesn't work, and then the Skylar goes because of my stupidity. So yeah, that one hurt a lot.
So, did you know? So, I guess what's going on when you head back to camp with Carly, Reynolds, and Amber? Given that if the five are sticking together, you're looking to be a minority.
I think we kind of went to camp. We were just kind of like, well, like we got to regroup. We got to find that idol as soon as we can. Like that's imperative if we're gonna survive. I think we had gone directly to the next challenge.
Yeah, so at this challenge, Megan and Todd win the challenge and are immune.
Yeah. So the round before, like before Skylar, when Megan found the idol, like majority of people like sprinted back to camp. It seemed like once we got to the path, like I think Sharif this was when Sharif had his torch and was like trying to block people from going past him. And then like Reynolds and Amber took off and Sharif took off. And then Megan was behind me and she goes, are we really doing this right now? And I was like, I guess so. And then I started running. So then, yeah, it was after the Scholar vote. We do that challenge. And was this the water? I think it was the water one. I don't know. Whatever it was, whatever the challenge was. I just remember I like left my buff at the opposite. Oh, no, this was the pigeon. Clay pigeon. I had taken my buff off over there where we did it because I didn't want it on my wrist. And when we were getting ready to leave, I was like, oh, shoot, I left my buff. So I like walk over to back to the far side of the challenge place, pick up my buff. I turn around, and there's not a soul inside. Everyone had sprinted back to camp. All I saw was Trevor and Storm chasing after everybody. And I was just like, there's no way I'm like, I was like, I'm not going to sprint and step in a hole and break my leg or tear my ACL again. Like, I'm not beating anybody back to camp at this point. So I'm just walking. Like, I'm just taking my time. I'm walking back. I find Sharif had left his sunglasses. So I just picked them up and put them on. And I just enjoyed a nice stroll by myself back to camp. I get down there. I think some people were still running around. I was like, Sharif, you forgot these. And I was like, the idol's been found already. Like, I know it. Like, I'm not. And on this, whatever. So, the four of us kind of talked, trying to figure out what to do. Hadn't really heard anything about them having the idol, so I was like, well, great, this is not working out in our favor. So it was just kind of like, well, like, what are they going to pick off? And for me, I'm like, oh, I hope they go for Amber Reynolds, not me. Because me and Carly had been starting to get closer, so I was like, she can just slide into the role with me and Skylar now. So like, hopefully something happens. So yeah, then we go to tribal, and like, I think it was right when we were leaving, Reynolds came up to me and he was like, they're voting Carly, we're playing the idol for her. And I was like, are you sure?
Did you know that Amber had an idol?
No, it was at that point when I found out. He was like, we found the idol, like they're voting Carly, we're gonna play it on her, we're gonna be good. And I was like, okay, like, I don't know how much sense that makes to me, but cool. I'd rather you play it on me just in case. But then I was like, like I guess that does make sense. Like we did with Todd, we voted for him because we thought he'd be the least likely one to get an idol played on him. Obviously wouldn't if I hadn't told Tony, or else you don't think he would have. So I was like, okay, that makes sense. Why that would be Carly. And I was like, I think it was at that moment I was like, okay, well let's vote for Sharif because no one said a name. I was like, let's get him out of here. At that point, I thought Sharif had an idol, so I was like, like maybe we can bounce him out with the red idol, and that'll be great. So we got to tribal, and like Sharif made it a point to not let me and Reynolds be next to each other at that tribal. Like as we were walking, he was like right by my side. I pretty much sat in the same seat at most tribal councils at the end on the back right. So I'm like walking back there, and like Sharif's like right there next to me. And like Reynolds was right there too, because me and Reynolds were trying to talk about something. So I just remember like Sharif like stepping like all the way across a stump to get to the seat next to me, and just sat down, and I just kind of laughed. And then Reynolds sat in front of him, and then me and Reynolds were trying. I think we were still like talking about who to vote for, and I was like leaning up, like trying to whisper in his ear, and Sharif's like putting his ear right there. So then I was like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "Go over here and talk." And I thought it was just gonna be me and Reynolds. And then the next thing I know, Amber and Carly jump up at the same time, and we all just like run over and make a little circle. And Amber's like, she's like, "Oh my god!" She was like, "We have the idol. They're voting for Carly. We know they're voting for Carly for a fact. So like, we're good. We're playing for her. Like, who should we vote?" And I was like, "Sharif. Sharif's got the red idol. Like, let's get Sharif." And they were like, "No." They were like, "Sharif doesn't have the red idol." And I was like, "Are you sure?" And they're like, "Yes, we know for a fact Sharif doesn't have the idol." I go, "Well, who does then?" Because I don't know this information. And I was like, "Carlos?" And they were like, "Yeah, Carlos has it." And I was like, and it was that moment that was like a light bulb moment that I was like, I was like, "I see you, Carlos." It's like, "I see what you're doing. You told them about that it's Carly going home. You want them to play the idol on her, so we vote somebody out." And I knew like the three of them were close, and I was kind of expecting the three of them to get together at some point. But like Amber and Reynolds were usually pretty frustrated with Carlos, and it just wasn't making sense to me. And I was like, but it was that moment. I was literally like, my brain goes, ding, 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 here we go. Like, you've got it. Like, this is exactly what you need to find out. So I was like, Carlos is looking information. And like, this is a perfect chance we get Sharif out. That's going to fracture that alliance a lot because Sharif had so much control or like, say or respect within the alliance that if he's gone, it is a detriment to them. We sit back down. Obviously, the votes get cast. Parker Ash and Amber plays the idol for Carly. And I just remember because I was sitting next to Sharif, and I remember just being like, as the votes were being read, they said Carly was just kind of like, this worked. And I was like, I'm in such a good position now. And then, like, obviously, Carly, Reynolds, Amber, super excited, and they were, like, celebrating super hard. And me and Sharif had talked throughout the game. Like, after the Frank vote, we were just kind of like, and the Josh vote, it was kind of like, like, we want to work together, but, like, it doesn't seem like it's in the cards for us in this game. So there was just a lot of mutual respect between the two of us. And I remember I even watched the video the other day. We both just kind of like, when they read Sharif's vote and said he was the next person voted out, we both just kind of looked at each other, dapped him up, and just gave him a big hug because it was nothing but respect for Sharif because I know he's a hell of a player. And then Amber, Carly, and Reynolds are like jumping up and down, like in front of everyone, like in this big group hug. And I just kind of sat back down and remember just being like, that was a weight off my shoulders, like getting him out of the game. Like I know what I need to do to get the end, and now like I saw my path to the end at that point. And so for me, it was just kind of like I can do this. Like I wasn't even thinking about celebrating the vote, and then they all like ran up to me to give me a hug, and they kind of threw me off, and I was kind of like, oh yeah, like that was awesome. Like I should be enjoying this moment right now. But I do think it was hard for me just because I had a lot of respect for Sharif and. Wanted it to work out between us, and it just never did. So that was a pivotal travel council for me as well.
So we end kind of day 6 with probably the wildest 3 back-to-back rounds I think I've seen in a
3
real
straight
foot game.
idols.
Yeah, with 3 successful idle plays back to back like this, like it's an incredible thing to survive and to witness, I think.
Yeah,
Um,
and that was also because that was Thursday, and I was the last vote out on Thursday, my first time. So that was kind of like, all right, that's the last like thing off the list besides winning. Um, well, I guess beating eighth place, even though technically there was only 20 people in my first season. There was 21 this season, so ninth technically would have been the same placement. But I just wanted to say I did better than eighth. Um, yeah, so we go back to camp that night, and it was funny because at one point when I started working with Amber and Reynolds, she was like, she's like, I pay super close attention to who people sleep with at night because everyone says who you sleep next to is who you're working with, and you even were still sleeping with us when at first you were like not really there with us, and I knew you were going to come back to the dark side, just because I was sleeping with them. And so like in my head, like, and me and Amber have talked about this since, like, there was some intentionality behind my actions when we got back to camp. I didn't sleep in the shelter with Amber, Reynolds, Carly that night. I just kind of went back and decided to sleep by the fire. But part of it, which I didn't know this, but it was like Amber, Reynolds, Carly, and Carlos, I think, were all in the shelter. And part of me was like, oh, I don't think there's any room in there for me. But there was some of it where I was like, oh, like I should just sleep out here to like let them know, like I'm coming for you now, because I knew that at that point, again, it was kind of back to a 4-4 split. People were talking about going to Rocks again, and I'm like, yeah, at this point, like if I get Reynolds or Amber out, like I'm in the final 3, because me and I was like, I know like Sharif's gone. Like I have a better in with Todd now. I was like, I know Todd's with Megan pretty closely. Me and Carly had just been getting closer. So I felt like I had numbers there. At that point, I was done with Tony, trying to like get with him. I would talk to him, but I just didn't really believe anything he said, which comes into play at the next vote. And yeah, so that was interesting time. Yeah, I'm trying to think what the next challenge is.
I don't know either. So day 7, at what point do you kind of slip into that role Sharif was in with Megan and Todd? Like when does that get formalized?
It actually started right after on the way back to camp.
Oh, wow.
Because Todd and Megan, again, I had that light bulb moment with Carlos. Me and Megan had been starting to talk a little bit more. And I think it was Megan that I talked to first, like right when we were leaving. And she was like, oh my God, like that was so cool. Like, how did y'all know to play the idol for her? And I went, y'all got a rat in your group. So that's all I'm saying. I said, we can talk about it more. I said, but there's a rat in your group that told them. I said, they didn't do that, just pulling it out of a rabbit out of a hat and saying, no, we're going to play it on Carly. I was like, no, like I said, one of your people told them. So we can talk about it. And then we got back to camp. And I think I told Todd that night too. I was like, I said, you know how they figured that out? I was like, somebody told them. It's like, Carlos told them. He told them. I said, he didn't tell me. I said, well, he told Reynolds and Amber who the vote was. And then that's when I was like, I was like, those 3 are friends in real life. I was like, obviously everyone's been together. I was like, I guarantee you they're trying to get to a situation where it's the 3 of them in final 5, and then they're just going to boom, boom, the last 2, and the 3 of them are going to be at the end. I said, I'm telling you, I've got the read on it. And so then I think that's when Tony and Todd and Megan really kind of started listening to me and kind of built some solid foundation of trust, especially with Megan. So I mean, like I said, when I had that light bulb, I went to work right away because I was like, I see a path to the end. I just have to lock things in before it gets away from me. The next morning.
You have the auction the next morning.
Oh, that's right. We had the auction.
I mean, I can see why you forget because you got nothing out of it.
Yeah, I didn't buy anything. I mean, I was waiting, and they told us beforehand, like, there's not going to be an advantage. There's not going to be an idol. Like,
unless you buy an onion.
Only food. Yeah. they're like, it's only going to be food, so like, don't feel like you have to save all your money for the end. Like, it's going to be fine. So we went in, and I was like, okay. Like, I was like, I really don't want to eat like too much. Like, I wasn't very hungry at that point. I felt like I had enough tank in the gas to make it through to the end. So I was like, like, I'm just going to wait for something that blows me away, specifically banana pudding, because I knew Jen was there the night before, and they had said she brought like 3 things of banana pudding. So I was like, they're going to bring some banana pudding out, and I'm putting all $100 on it because that's all I want right now. I'm craving it, especially after I saw Jen at the game the night before. And then they just never brought it out. I think I bid on like 2 or 3 things, but then I was just like, yeah, whatever. I wasn't going to pay that much for it because I knew banana pudding would be a popular one if it came out. And then when they brought out what ended up being the McDonald's, yeah, Frank ate it all. Trevor ate it. I was told Trevor ate like half of a pan of it. So yeah, I wasn't very happy about that. But the last thing that ended up being the McDonald's that Amber got, I think I went up pretty high on that, and I was just like, I don't care that much. And then right after that, Park was like, it's over, and I was just like, oh, okay. I mean, Reynolds had a little feast himself, but I'm actually glad I didn't with the challenge that we had next because
so this is where you had to memorize the sequence, come back, but it was a lot of heats of it and a lot of heats in the heat, and I think a lot of players were kind of ill.
Yeah, a lot of people regretted eating all that food. And yeah, but that challenge was, I thought I had a good system going, especially at the beginning, just being like, run down there, see how many there are, memorize a chunk. It ended up, I think it was 8 every round. So I was like, memorize 4 as fast as you can, run back, put those down, then run back, get the last 4, come back. Like I felt like I could do it quick enough, at least in the beginning, the first few rounds. Then turns out the second round I screwed up. I flip-flopped the 3rd and 4th one on my thing, so I was out. So then I got to watch, but I got to watch Carly be a complete badass in that challenge and just blown away by her, just because the puking between every rounds, and then just going right back to it, and just sticking to her system that worked for her. I know I'm not the fastest sprinter here. I'm going to go at my pace. I'm going to get down there. I'm going to memorize it. I'm going to come back. Easy work. And then obviously, again, just her puking her brains out every round while she waited to go again. And then just still going out and being able to do it. Like, when I throw up, like, I'm all over the place. Like, I throw up pretty violently, like Carly was. And so, like, I don't think there's any way I ever would have been able to be puking like that and then go run and memorize all 8 of them in one go. And Carlos, too, which is funny because if I hadn't screwed up the 2, Carlos would have been the second person out. He was the one right behind me because I think at the beginning he may have been doing something similar to me. Or maybe it was just he was taking his time with the trying to do all 8 at once. So that changed that challenge a lot.
Because Carlos ends up winning.
Yes, Carlos ended up winning. So that was obviously hats off to Carlos too. So anyone who won that challenge is going to have my respect because that was not a fun one.
So for strategy, this is kind of like you leave Amber and Reynolds, and you, I guess, if they're the dark side, you go back to the light side of the Force, which is Megan and Todd.
Yeah, I think it may have been that morning where Todd came to me and proposed the final 3 with him and Megan. And I was kind of like, okay, yeah. I was like, because at that point I was like, I feel like I can beat Todd. Megan was still a question mark on where I felt on one, how much I trusted her and how much she trusted me, but also just how that would be going against her in the end. Because again, people have been saying since the marriage, if Megan makes the end, she's going to win. So I want to say it was that morning. Maybe it was after that vote that he approached me about the final 3. And it was around that same time that I told Carly, like, look, like, you and me to the end, like, you're my final 2. Um, so for me, at that point, whenever it was that got established, I was like, all right, like my ideal Final Four scenario is Todd, Meg, and Carly, because I feel like it almost guarantees that I'm going to be sitting at 3. Um, so that's really when that started to take shape. But obviously, I knew the big part was getting out a Reynolds or an Amber. And I knew, like, we agreed to do Reynolds first. And I was kind of like, I was like, I knew Amber was going to blow a gasket when that happened. Like, I know Reynolds would have obviously still tried to stir things up, but he's just not as vocal as Amber is. So I knew that she was going to go nuts when that happened. And then once we do the votes, and so leading up to this was another turning point where I actually almost blew the entire game up on accident. I don't know how many people I've talked about this with from the game other than Megan, because I almost got Megan voted out accidentally. So that morning, after the challenge, we're talking, and everyone's kind of like 4-4. We're gonna go to rocks. All that talk again. Carlos comes to me, and he had told us that Amber had told him if he voted for her that she was never going to talk to him again. Whether that's true or not, or Carlos was just playing that up, like I'm sure that they'll talk about that in theirs. But so me and Carlos were sitting there, and he was like, I know we're doing 4-4. He's like, but I cannot vote for Reynolds. He was like, would you vote Reynolds and I'll vote Megan? He's like, then it'll still be 4-4. He's like, but then he's like, that way after the game, like when they see this, like they won't be as mad or have as big of a grudge at me for voting for Reynolds or for one of them. So I was like, at first I was like, I didn't understand it, and explained it again. I was like, okay, like, yeah, I guess, like, it's like I was willing to vote Reynolds anyway, so like I wasn't planning on voting Megan. So I was like, yeah, like, sure, that works. Because that was my hope, was that it was just going to be 5-3 on the vote, because Carlos would be voting Reynolds too. Tony had came to me and was like talking that he was going to flip and vote Megan out because he wasn't going to go rocks for her. But at that point, I didn't believe a word Tony said. I was like, you're just lying again. I was like, you're going to stay voting for Reynolds, which is what I want. So like, I'm not going to force the issue. Just make you think that I'm believing you once again. So we're sitting there, and I was like, I really don't want this to go to a revote or potential rocks. My concern was on a revote that there'd be one person from each side that flipped, and then it was just going to be tied again. So I was like, what way can I circumvent this and make sure that the first vote is the only vote? So I'm like, I'm going to throw my vote, and then it'll be 4 votes Reynolds, 3 votes Megan, and 1 vote somebody else. That would be the thing. It'd be 4 votes Reynolds, 3 votes Megan, and then I was going to vote for Amber, just as a throwaway. So I'm sitting there at camp like, damn, I'm good. I just came up with such a great plan. I'm not telling a soul. Like, I'm going to go in there. Everyone's going to be so shocked by what just happened. Like, I'm a genius. Like, what can I say? And I just keep thinking about it. We're walking the tribal, and I'm like, as happy as can be, so proud of myself. And then I was like, I can really solidify some trust with Megan here. I was like, so let me tell her. Like, I was like, and I can also kind of cut that rope even further with Carlos. So I said, Megan, look. I said, this is the deal. I was like, you got to trust me. I was like, it's going to be a 4-3-1 vote. I was like, you're going to get 3 votes. I was like, I'm throwing my vote. I said, Carlos came to me and like, he wants to vote for you because he said he can't vote for Reynolds or Amber. I was like, so like, he thought that I was voting you, but like, I'm voting Reynolds, so like, we're good, or whatever. I was like, but you just got to trust me. And she was kind of like, okay, like, I trust you. And I was like, it's going to be a 4-3-1 vote. It's going to be great. Like, this was like, show you like, I'm all in working with you. We're sitting there, literally, like, we're going through tribal, and I'm just like, I'm a goddamn genius. Like, this is great. And then Parker's like, all right, all right, it's time to get to the vote. was like, thank God. He said, we're going to start at the far side in the front. And we're like, Snake, Austin, and across the back. So I'm sitting there and I'm going, all right, let me run the numbers one more time in my head for this genius plan. So I'm like, I vote Amber. I was like, then it's Carly, or I was like, it's Todd, Megan, and Tony on Reynolds, and then it's Reynolds, Amber, Carlos, and Carly on Megan. And I went, wait a second. I was like, that's not the right math. So let me do it again. So I did it again, and I was like, no, that can't be right because this was my genius plan. I was just be something I could get to the end and be like, look what I did. So I did the numbers again, and I was like, well, the third time, and I was like, oh no, I was like, what am I doing? Am I about to ruin things? Now I'm panicking. I'm trying to stay calm. I'm literally sitting there, my hands like in between my legs, going like oh my God, like, what have I done? So I'm like, I have to vote for Reynolds. Like, I can't throw my vote. I was like, now Megan's gonna think I'm a liar. She's not gonna trust me. So I was just like, oh my God. So I literally walked up to vote, and I was sitting there at the voting booth, and I'm like, doing the numbers in my head like multiple times. And I was like, no, I have to vote Reynolds. Like, do not screw this up. So I vote Reynolds, 4-4 tie. Obviously on the revote, Tony doesn't flip. So it was me, Todd, Tony. I guess Carlos voted him on the revote. I don't remember exactly. But yeah, so I was just like, I was like, first thing I need to do, I need to go talk to Megan. So like,
wow.
So I go to Megan, I'm like, look, I was like, that did not go as I told you it was going to. I said, but I'm glad it didn't because I was like, I almost got you voted out on accident. And I went through everything with her and told her, and she was like, yeah, like, when you told me that they wanted you to vote Reynolds and that you were gonna throw your vote, like, and that Carlos was voting me, she was like, I was really confused on how that was supposed to work out for me to stay. But she was like, I was just trusting you. And I was like, well, I'm glad I didn't burn you on accident because that would have been horrific. And I probably would have handed the game to Carlos if I had done that.
So
that was my near fatal blunder.
Reynolds goes out. Amber is upset.
Slightly.
And Reynolds also has some parting gifts where I think he takes your rice with you.
Yes, he had taken the rice before we left.
But yeah, Amber is slightly upset and likely verbalizes that to you or other players.
Not necessarily to me. This is when the whole blow-up happens between her and Tony. She's obviously very upset. And Amber, she speaks her mind. Like, she's not going to bite her tongue. So she was letting us know how I feel. Like, obviously she's upset. Like, her best friend in the game just got out. So, like, my thing was just like, hey, give her space, let her be. I guess Tony had enough of it, so that everyone's seen the video. It's great.
Enough to get Reelfoot banned on another channel.
Yeah, definitely. I don't think it was necessarily that fight. I think it was the C word being dropped by Amber when she was telling us how she was going to be when we got back to camp and the rest of the time she was there. Yes, I mean, I just was like, I'm not getting involved in this. I'm keeping my distance. Just let her have her moment. Obviously, Tony felt differently. So that was entertaining to watch, but I was just kind of like, yeah,
I'm good.
Keep my space in here. Y'all knock yourselves out.
So the next immunity challenge, Megan wins. I don't know what it is. I don't remember. I went and wrote down the ones you won. That was what I was doing minutes before this podcast.
Yeah, I remember the ones I
won. And so, talk me through the strategy this round. With Reynolds out, is Amber an easy vote, or are you looking at like Amber's allies of Carlos?
I want to say that there was some talk of doing Tony or Carlos, but I think once we had gotten back to camp, and she took the pot to the lid to the pot and the machete and like got rid of them, or not got rid of them. She decided to hide them like a hidden in the idol for us to have fun fighting. I think that just really was kind of the nail in the coffin. Where people were like, all right, like we're not going to continue to deal with this. Like, no. So obviously we go to thing, and she was working hard on Carlos. So like, just like her and Carlos were talking, and like, very emotional talk, like right after that tribal and Reynolds went out. So then, I mean, obviously Amber knew she was getting the votes, and honestly, like this was the first time I really didn't even think that extensively about shot in the dark coming into play.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it's funny because shot in the dark was such a big thing and a concern in every vote pre-merge. It seemed like, at least in the tribals I was at. Whereas at the merge, like people couldn't play it because everyone's vote was so important to making sure that the people they wanted to go home did go home.
Mm-hmm.
So honestly, it kind of become an afterthought at that point. And so she plays her shot in the dark, doesn't get it. And we're splitting the vote. That was the agreement. Split the vote between Carlos and her, just in case. Like, split that dynamic up, make sure they don't have each other. And originally it was supposed to be 3 votes, Amber, and 2 for Carlos, but Todd changed his vote, I believe. I'm pretty sure that was what happened. So Amber plays her shot in the dark. Not the biggest surprise in the world. She's not safe. Well, then Parker says, does anyone else have anything? And Carlos stands up, so I'm like, oh, he's playing his idol. And he gives Parker a shot in the dark, and I went, oh no, if he gets this, he can play an idol on him. So I was like panicking at that point. I was like, this will get real interesting. Because I was like, at that point, obviously I'm worried his vote would turn on me or Carly. Is what I figured it would maybe go to. Obviously, I would have pushed for Tony in that instance. But that was my big fear, is that Amber and Carlos would really want to go for me. At that point, Carly could be in self-preservation mode. Tony had lied to me so much, so then it could easily be me. So fortunately, Carlos' shot in the dark doesn't work. So then he obviously plays the idol on himself. He actually has the majority of the votes. So then obviously Amber just goes home by default. But yeah, that would have been wild if they had pulled that off. A shot in the dark and being able to use the idol. That would have been insane. But yeah, so then obviously Amber's gone. We're down to 6.
Frank mentions, like, I think the final 7 challenge was the foot block challenge. Because I know final 6 is when you have to, like, do the breakout challenge, open a box, start a fire, you have to, like move the water with your mouth.
Oh, yes, that is what it is. Because we did it at Tribal, and me and Megan were side by side. And that was such a fun challenge because I wanted to be on the end. I didn't want to be in the middle where I'd have to worry about 2 people. I just wanted to be on the end. And then it worked out where I figured it'd be between me, Megan, and Todd for that. I got to be right next to Megan. So we're going, and I thought I was moving pretty quickly because I thought it would go fast. And I look over, and Megan's going even faster. So then that sped me up. And it was honestly just like, I think that challenge was maybe a minute and a half.
It was pretty fast.
Me and Megan just tore through that thing. And I got my disc on, and she was like doing her second to last block. And I just remember I grabbed my one like as fast as I could, and I was just kind of like throwing them with that. I didn't really care if I knocked it over because I knew I had to rush. And I didn't even know if I could do this. They probably would have told me I couldn't. But I thought about trying to grab the last 2 at the same time and putting them on. I'm sure they would have said that. You can't do that. I just don't remember if they said one at a time. But so obviously I was just hoping by me speeding up, it would speed Megan up and make her make a mistake. But it didn't. But that was just a really fun challenge because it was so fast and so intense. And that's a challenge from the show that I've always wanted to do. So that was a fun one.
So you then need to go do touchy subjects. Always a favorite. Do you remember if you had anything notable for
I got
superlatives for you?
5.
You got 5.
I got
What were the
5.
5 you got?
I had them written down, but they're in the back of the house, so I don't want to go grab that right now. I'm trying to think of that. I know I got who smells the worst for the second time. I think I may have gotten that in Pirate when we did touchy
No,
subjects.
I thought Stacy got that one in Pirates.
It may have been a tie between me and Stacey
Okay.
because I remember I was like, "This is the second time I've got this," and it was funny after because Megan was like, "She was like, awesome." She was like, "I don't know if it stinks, more so the fact that your shirt has just gotten so dirty. It was like that light baby blue, just always being the dirt. It's horrifically dirty." She was like, "So it just looks like you stink more than everybody else does." I got. Who would you want to give an advantage to? So that was pretty cool. But at the same time, at that point in the game, I'm like, I knew I was going to be answers to bigger questions, and that's when really like I knew that I was emerging as a bigger threat in the game.
Mm-hmm.
So when they said touchy subjects, I was like, you mother trucker. Like,
Mm-hmm.
don't do this to me now. Like, I've got this fight with 3 with Todd and Megan. I've got this fight 2 with Carly. Like, I know Tony and Carlos run the house. Like, don't need them like being able to have ammunition to use against me. But I was just glad it was for reward, not immunity. I think when we did it in Pirate, it was for immunity. And I hate
it was for immunity.
Challenge.
Mello won it.
Yes. So I was glad it was only for reward, but obviously very nervous going into it, especially reading some of the questions as we filled it out. The initial like filling out the answers before they asked us in the group setting for the challenge. So yeah, I was like, okay, like some of these are probably going to be me, so we might have to do some damage control after this. And like I could care less about winning touchy subjects. Like I'll just when they ask the questions, like I'll like know what the answer is probably going to be, and I'll just put a different answer down just to be like, oh, like, I don't know what's going on in the game, or I don't have a good read on it. Yeah, so I got who smells the worst. Who do you want to give an advantage to the most? Or who would you give an advantage to? Who has the best read on the cast? Which obviously that one feels good because I knew that I'd kind of been figuring things out and had a good read most of the game. But again, that one was one where I was like, and then the other 2 were ties. It was who's made the biggest move in the game so far. And it was a tie between me, Megan, and Carlos. And then it was either who are you most likely to vote for at the end or who's most likely to win. And that was a tie again between me, Megan, and Carlos. So those were the 5 that I got.
So Tony ends up winning. He takes Todd and Carly out for popsicles. You've mentioned that Tony's on the outs. Why is that the case at this point in the game?
I mean, for me, he's on the outs because like I was just done with him at that point. Even during the tribal when Amber went home, I think Tony was on like opposite side and he was talking about something. And I just started, like I couldn't help it. I just started laughing at what he was saying because I said it. I think I said it to him in the final tribal. I said it in confessionals. Tony could have told me the sky was blue and I wouldn't have believed him. So yeah, so it was just like there was a point where I was just like I just had to laugh. And like I usually don't react to tribals, and then Parker's like, "Oh, Austin, like you're laughing at what he's saying," and I'm like, "Oh crap." But then it was funny because Amber was sitting next to me, and she was like, "I kind of like you a little bit more now because I was doing that." So I was just kind of done with Tony. I was ready for him to go at that point. I even told him like I actually think he was going to take me on the reward for touchy subjects, and he like asked if anyone like really wanted to go or if anyone didn't want to go, and I was like, they were like, it's popsicle and lemonade, and I was like, well, like, I could give 2 flying ducks about lemonade and popsicle right now. Like I'm good. Like you don't need to choose me. Like, you can choose somebody else. And then Megan was the same. She was like, like I'm good. And then Carlos was upset with Tony a little bit because he was upset when Amber went because he tried to save her. It just didn't work out. and Tony had like tried to go like talk to him right away, and Carlos just wanted the space. So they had not an argument, but just like leave me alone. So like Carlos wasn't even looking at Tony. So Carlos was like, well, he's like, Austin and Megan said they don't want to go. Carlos isn't looking at me. Todd, Carly, let's go. So then it was just kind of me and Megan going back to camp with Carlos. Carlos is pitching to me when we get back to camp. That I don't really have any lifelines left. Like, if you keep me safe, like, I'll do what I can to like look out for you. And for me, like, I had a lot of respect for Carlos because when I caught on to the game he was playing, I was like, me and him are playing the exact same game.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not the exact same game, but very similar games. Kind of that sneaky, under the radar. You're good with everybody. You have information. Divvying out bits of information to people at key points in the game. So I was like, I've got a lot of respect for the game this guy's playing. I was like, but only one of us can be sitting there. But again, for me, I was just so done with Tony. And then when we found out we were still having another challenge and tribal, I was like, you know what? If Tony doesn't win immunity, like, I want him gone. I would have cared if it cost me the game, but I was kind of like, I'd rather have Carlos here and me go out, and then Carlos ends up being the winner of the game, than for Carlos to go out now and Tony's still here, and then Tony gets me out of the game. Like, then I would have been pissed. Carlos pitched me. I was like, I'll do what I can to look out for you. And then we go to that next challenge. Well, actually, it's funny because at Final 7, this is when I started this. I don't think you've gotten to the voting confessionals yet. The Final 7, we go to vote, and I walk up there because I knew as soon as I got Reynolds out of the game, I said, I'm sitting in the Final 3. Like, there's no doubt in my mind I'm there. Like, I have my 4 people I'm working with, Final 2, Final 3. Like, I'm going to be sitting there. I see it. Mm-hmm. So at Final 7, when I went to vote for Amber, I was like, if I was them, I would vote me out of this game. Because if they were smart, they would vote me out right now. Mm-hmm. So we go to that Final 6 immunity challenge. That one's the water, unlock the box, tie the sticks, and then do the fire making, bring the rope, which that challenge sucked. Like, I've always thought it'd be cool to like do it where you got to fill it up and try to get the thing out. If I ever have to do that challenge again, I hope it's like in Cagayan where I'm sitting on the platform. I'd rather be crouched. When I hate heights, I'd rather stand up there and pull that bucket up than have to do it with my mouth, because I was out there about to throw up like Carly after she had been running like a much further distance after she had eaten the Todd handful of almonds. I was sounding like that just from carrying water in my mouth. I wasn't even swallowing it. That was not the thing for me. And at first I thought I was doing well. And then I look over and mine's like this high and Todd's like 3/4 of the way done. And I was like, what the frick is this guy doing? Because me and him are sharing the same bucket. Yes, that sucks. I've always wanted to do that, having to tie the sticks and reach and get the thing. So that was a lot of fun. I don't think my tying was that good, but I think I did a good job of finding pieces that were sturdy enough instead of just throwing them together randomly. And finding one that had a notch on the end to be the one to grab my ring. And then obviously getting up there trying to do the fire. Todd had a decent head start on me. I know he said that like his flame like kept coming up and was like dancing all around his rope. I never got my fire started. I know that he said that he thought mine was like all around my rope too, but I never got mine started. I had a couple sparks, just never got anything to catch. Mm-hmm. But obviously that was one I really wanted to win because it had been a while since I won. Once I caught up to him in the fire, I was really hoping I could catch him. Didn't, and I think that was the one that he tied the record on. Yeah, that was when he tied the record. Yeah, for his third win.
So Parker has a question. Did you have to convince Todd and Megan to vote Tony, or were they always on board for voting Tony out at that point?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think they were pretty on board for it. I don't think it took much convincing. Because because I mean, by that point in the game, Tony had just been caught up in so many lies. And for me, another reason to get him out was because I didn't want him to be someone where like, oh, I feel like he's an easy person to beat in the end, so let me just keep him around and take him. So I don't, if I remember correctly, it didn't take much convincing. I've seen other Todd's done, so maybe Megan can talk more on that in hers, but it did take a lot of convincing. But for me, it was pretty simple as I thought about it. Like there was definitely some consideration to do Carlos, just because I did feel like he was a bigger threat to me in the game. But again, at that point, I was just done with Tony. For me, I would have rather had Carlos be there and waking up on the last day with us.
Frank has a question. In the challenge, do you ever just think of puking the water into the pipe?
There was one time where I was like spitting it out, and I thought I was gonna throw up, and I was like, I'm just gonna
funnel
it and just let it all go in there. I was like, they can't.
Not against the rules.
Like, didn't say they said we couldn't wring out like our shirts, our hair, our buffs, or anything, but they never said you couldn't puke into this thing. I mean, I'm sure that would have made it very interesting pulling the key out.
I mean, at that point, it
doesn't matter.
You for immunity wins.
Yeah. There was a bucket of water I could run back to and just dunk my hand in after. So. And it would have been my own throw up. So.
Yeah. Anything else strategy-wise you want to talk about this round when Tony goes home?
No, I don't think so.
So next, you have your last nights in the Reelfoot this game. How was it?
Oh, that was so fun. Like, well, obviously we got to go to a new camp, which we were all hoping for. We're like, hey, Parker's been doing everything by the new school era. Like, he's got to send us to a new camp. And I guess apparently the tribe handlers, Trevor and Storm, had something to do with that because they hated making the walk to where we had originally merged. So they wanted to move us back to where Achila had started, because that was closest at that point at the camps they would use. And then so between that and then I think a little bit of the Amber stuff, they were like, okay, let's move into this one. And then they gave us rice and machete, like a new thing of rice. They gave us a ton of rice. Like, I feel like they gave us more than we started with in the game. And we had machete and stuff. So we were able to eat like a bunch of rice that night. I mean, I say a bunch, but at that point in the game, your stomach, you don't really eat that much. So Todd became the rice cooker that night, and he just like dumped a huge amount in there. And there was definitely a lot left over. But, you know, it was pretty dark when we got to that camp. We knew it wasn't going to rain, so we weren't really worried about trying to put up a tarp or anything. We just like laid both, I think they laid both tarp, or just one tarp out and a bunch of stuff over there. Todd did his usual, going to sleep by himself, and then I slept right by the fire. We got the fire going. We knew it wasn't going to be that cold of a night, so we weren't overly concerned about keeping it going that much. Like, there wasn't a ton of firewood left there either, so we just kind of got what we could. But no one was like, oh, I'm going to stay up and tend the fire for warmth all night. So I mean, the fire ended up going out. Like, I slept right next to the fire that night, because we were only supposed to take like our personal belongings and like nothing that was already there. But I knew Sharif had like this massive poncho that was like a fancy poncho, like super warm. Like, people would sleep on it all the time at night. So I like casually stuffed that in my bag as we had picked our stuff up from the other camps, and then I used that as my my bed for the night. Also, a hack I learned: keep warm when it's really cold out there. Someone else had like left the poncho, and I took that too, and just said it was mine. But so I was sleeping on Sherry's poncho, and then I wore the poncho to sleep, but I didn't put my head through it. I just like pulled the hood in and like across, so the top was like closed, and then so like all the breathing, all my breath like stays in there. So it was kind of like my own little heating system. So that helped keep me warm when the fire was out. So if anybody needs advice on staying warm, sleep inside your poncho with your head in it, keep your head out. I did that twice, and it worked pretty well. But that night I could not sleep. Like, I laid down next to the fire, did my usual buff all the way over my face, had my hoodie on, pulled all the way closed, and my mind was just racing because I knew I was like, Austin, I was like, you're going to be in the final three. I said, you need to win one. I said, you need to win one challenge. I said, do not let Carlos win that first challenge, and you would be in the final three. It's like, you played a great game. You're going to win. And then obviously, like, my heart was just pounding out of my chest just thinking about that. Like, the opportunity to be in the final three and, like, knowing in my heart of hearts that I was going to be there. So then my mind starts running to, well, what jury votes am I going to get? I was like, Skyler, like, I should have that one. I was like, Josh was a question mark. I was like, Adams, question mark. We're probably not getting him. I was like, Sharif. I was like, if I go when Megan's there, like, I'm probably not getting that vote. I was going through I was like, Amber Reynolds, like, we'll see how pissed off they are at me. I was like, Tony, kind of the same. Like, I don't know where he'll fall. So I was like, okay, I did feel like I could get Amber Reynolds. So I was kind of like, okay, like, I feel like I have like 3 or 4. If I get Carlos out, maybe I can get him. I was like, I feel good in any scenario. So that's why my mind was racing. So it took me forever to fall asleep that last night. So I was like, just get there. I was like, good, wake up and win a challenge. I said, if you win 2 challenges, perfect. Like, then you're not stressed at all. I was like, but if Carlos wins the challenge, then we're going to be damn good. Because at this point, I've gotten no votes. Nobody's written my name down a single time. And so I know it's coming. We just had touchy subject right before the finals, at Final 6. And at the Final 6 tribal, once again, when I went to vote, I went up there and said, they were smart. They would vote me out right now, but they're not. So that last night was just a lot for me. I was just ready to get to Saturday and get rolling. They wasted no time on Saturday.
In terms, just before we continue to the next challenge, which is a challenge I know you'll like, Parker has a question about your alliance with Carly. Who are you pitching her in terms of final 3?
So for her, I was kind of pitching just me, her, and Todd, because obviously everyone knows Carly had wanted Megan out for a while. And I feel like that is one thing I've talked about is once I really got that, I'd been working on Todd for a while, and then I knew Megan was going to be the other part of that. People had come to me and been like, let's do like Megan or Todd. And I was like, and people would be like, why not? Like, you're big threats. And I was like, I don't know. I was like, it's just not the right time to do it. Like, we can save them for later. Obviously, in my mind, I'm like, I need these people here. So, I mean, there was definitely opportunities where I could have turned on them. But I think that was what I was telling Carly was me, her, and Todd. I'll talk about it a little bit more at the Final 4, that whole dynamic. But, yeah, that was just kind of where I was at. I think me and her were just talking about taking Todd, and then having that feeling that it would be between the 2 of us more than likely, and being cool with the outcome. We always said we were like, what does Sam think of this? Like, we're both like really good friends with her. She must be so proud of us. Like all this stuff. So, yeah.
Were you thinking final 3, final 2?
I was thinking final 3, but I was, actually, this was the first final 3 in a game that I've ever played. Because when my first season in Reelfoot was final 2, we had a final 2, and Survival Challenge was a final 2. So I think I was just thinking final 3 because I was like, I gotta have a final 3 at some point. Like, there's no way I'm gonna have another final 2. So I think in my mind it was definitely a final 3. I just never thinking final 2.
So the next morning, you open straight with the immunity challenge. This is the Wilderness Survival Guide Challenge, and you end up winning.
Yeah, what a shock it was to have that at that point in the game. Obviously, I felt great when they came down and they were like, okay, we're going to do your next challenge right now. And they told us what it was. And I'm like, oh, great, Carly's here. Carlos isn't winning this. But I did feel bad as well because I looked over and saw Carlos and you could just see I'm not winning this. I haven't really read the book. I think he even said he hadn't read the book, or at least not all the way through. So you could just see like the pain on his face of being like, oh my gosh, like he knew he needed to win it, and then it's just something that he wasn't going to win. Because I mean, I think everyone presumed Carly was going to win because she was like, our memory's incredible.
Mm-hmm.
And so I mean, like I had read the book one time, I think on Tuesday, or no, it would have been Monday because it was while we were still at Blue.
Mm-hmm.
It was like right before we swapped. I think I read through the book one time. I read everything one time. I think I looked over there was a story about Native American chief, and all kind of how, like a legend on how Reelfoot Lake came about. I've read that a couple times through, but the rest of the book I'd only read through once. So they were like, all right, like we're going to do this. And the first couple questions asked, I was like, okay, like I actually know these.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. This is like pretty simple. It's just ABC. It's not short answer, which is great. So I actually felt really good once they were just doing ABC that I would have a decent shot. I just figured when it came down to a tiebreaker that Carly would win. And there was only like one question where I was like, like this. I know the answer, but like technically there's two that could be the answer, and it was which one of these snakes is considered a pit viper, like A, rattlesnake, B, milk snake, C, copperhead. And I was like, I feel like I know a decent amount about snakes, so I was like, copperheads and rattlesnakes are both pit vipers. Like, I know that for a fact. And so I was like, because when they first said A, rattlesnake, I was like, oh, I was about to put A, and then when they said copperhead, I was like, and I distinctly remember like the first sentence on copperhead, it said that it was a pit viper, and I didn't remember saying a rattlesnake, so I was like, just gotta go with it. I was like, if it's rattlesnake, I'm gonna go fit. Yeah, so I went with that, and then so obviously they tell us they're not telling who wins until we get to tribal after the votes are cast, so it's basically going to be like an immunity idol. So that's a whole other twist. But I think everyone just kind of presumed it was going to be Carly winning. And so obviously for me, I'm immediately like Carlos has got to be the vote. And you know, Megan and Todd were pretty much on board with that, and so was Carly. So it was pretty straightforward. I knew that, or I guess Carly wasn't really on board with it, like a vote, but I thought she was. So that was the first time in the game where I was like, I'm gonna get votes at this tribal council. Again, I've got no votes cast against me, which I was like, I'm ready to get the final tribal, have no votes cast against me, and just be like,
the dream.
Look at that. Yeah, it was like the perfect game is right there. But so that was the first time I was worried, like extremely worried about seeing my name just because of not knowing the results. So obviously we go to tribal, do a lot of questions, we vote, comes out, and it's like, all right, we're gonna play this, or here's the results. It was like last place Carlos, Todd and Megan tied. It comes down to Austin Carly. And they were like the winner with 10, and I was like, I said, yep. So Carly got them all right. And like I was sitting there, like buff over my face, just like waiting for it and just praying that I wasn't going to have the majority of the votes. And he's like, Austin. And I was like, what? Like I literally went, oh. I won because I was just so flabbergasted that I won that over Carly. So that was my third to tie the record. So I'm like, great, going into the last challenge, I want to win, break the record, have that on my resume too. I said, you did what you needed, make sure Carlos didn't win. It's right there, Austin. You've got the Final Four you want. And then obviously start turning the votes. The first vote he pulls out is Austin, and I was like, there it is. So I guess technically the first vote cast against me, but it didn't count. I told people that in a normal scenario, like I would have gotten that vote, like so I would have had it before we went to try, but wouldn't been able to. And then Carly voted Megan, and then I think it was just me, Todd, and Megan that voted that way to get Carlos out. And then we're at the final four that I wanted. I think it was. I was looking at videos yesterday, and someone had commented on it. Was it final 8 or final 7? Final 8, I think. That I called. I was like, "This is what I want for my final four," and I got it there. So I was just like, I was like, awesome. And at that point, I was like, I don't necessarily think I have to win this challenge to go to the end of the game, which isn't the worst thing in the world because I don't have to be a decision maker. Because at that point, we're also thinking, we've done everything by the new school, or the new school survivor way. So it's like, is this going to be a fire making?
Yeah,
and,
I can see people are thinking about that now.
Yeah, so I mean, it was definitely a consideration, and I actually promised Carly. I think it was at 5, and maybe it was 6. I don't remember what it was. But I promised Carly if it was fire, like automatic fire making, I was going to take her.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, I do think had I won Final Four and it was that scenario, that I would have followed through on that. Obviously, to Megan's credit, she was more so thinking about that being a notch in somebody's belt, winning fire making, when it came down to that decision between me and Carly. But I mean, we can talk about that in a second. So we get there. We can talk about this stupid puzzle at Final Four.
Yeah, that was. I remember that took a while because that's just a puzzle where if you just don't know what you're doing, it's just painful because it takes a long time or guessing checking. So I was happy that Megan was able to solve it for all y'all's sake.
Yeah, and it made me mad because we went up and we saw what it was going to be, and I was like, oh my gosh! I was like, this puzzle. Like I've never had to do it before in a game, but I remembered I was like, Frank talked about this on day 1 or 2, and he was telling us like I remember he said there's one block that has 3 blacks on like all next to each other, and that's the key piece. And I just couldn't remember if he said you needed all 3 out or 2. And so I was honest. That's what I was doing throughout the challenge. I kept kind of flipping that one, and just trying different things to see. And then I guess the other key is the one that has 2 blues on the corners. So yeah, I mean, obviously just trying different combinations and not being 100% sure on what the right strategy was with the 3 black blocks. I was just trying to give it my best. I think there was probably 5 times where I would get it set and I'd be like, okay, this side's good, second side's good, third side's good, and I'd be walking around the back and I'd be like, Parker, come check this thing and give me my record. And then I'd get to that 4th side and it'd be like 2 orange, and I was just like, and I wanted to kick it so hard. I know, flip the bottom block, Lydia. I know that now.
Yeah, that was. I will say Lydia was very fun in the live stream of that challenge.
Oh, I'm sure she was. But no, I just remember right after the challenge, like right after Megan went, they didn't even give her the necklace yet. Nate and Pete are both like, dude, Austin, you almost had it. You just need to flip like 1 block, like 1 more turn, and you would have had it. And I was like, don't tell me that. Do not tell me that right now. That's the last thing I want to hear. Like, I was about to have the record, like, by myself, about to have a guaranteed spot in the final 3. Like, don't tell me that. Like, that's the last thing I want to hear.
Kirk's done that to me. He's like, we should have given you the Final Four challenge in Pirate. I'm like, this doesn't help me. This does not help me whatsoever.
Talk about a disaster of a puzzle. That one took, like 2 hours or something to solve?
And it might have not ever worked because it might have been warped.
It was warped. They had to change it down to 5. That's a great story. I have some great pictures from that challenge.
Good pictures. I do agree with that.
Yes, good pictures. But yeah, so I mean, obviously, lose the challenge. They give Megan immunity. We're walking back to camp, and Carly's walking in front of us. It's me, Todd, Megan, or Todd, Megan, me, and Todd just kind of like gets both our attention. And he just like points to Carly. He's like, "We're all good. We're all kind of right." And both like, yeah. So I'm like, I feel good. Like, I'm going to be in the final 3. We go back down to camp. Everyone sits down. Like, I was sitting up, but those 3 sat down. Todd sat here. Carly was sitting directly in front of me. and then Megan had like gone off to the side and was sitting on a branch, just like with her hands on her head. Um, no one's saying anything, and Carly just looks at me and she's like, she just nods. She's like, and I was just like, like, yeah. I was like, she's like, was everyone voting me? And I was like, yeah. So I'm sorry. So yeah, so that was tough, and then I went up to the top of the trail because it was just like very awkward after that. So I went to the top of the trail just like have a peek. I come back and Todd and Carly are just having a conversation like this, and Todd's like, oh, he's like, yeah, he's like, I'm voting for you, and she was like, you're not even having a discussion about it. He's like, no, like he's like, I know what I'm doing, like I'm voting for you, and I was just like. I was like, this is why I wanted to work with Todd this entire time because I knew this would happen.
Mm-hmm.
Like that he'd be a man of his word and that he would ride to the end with me. It was funny because obviously, you know, his big thing he talked about was going to the end with the best of the best, the heavy hitters. And I told him, I was like, dude, like you and me both have 3 immunities, so like going to the end together would be sick. Going into the final 4, I was like, I know one of us wants to break the record. But how cool would it be if Megan won? I was like, then all 3 of us have 3 wins each, but all tied for the record. Like that's incredible. And Todd was like, oh my god, like this is amazing. Like we have to have this happen. So then after Todd tells Carly like, yeah, like I'm voting for you, like not changing my mind. They were like, oh, like how long do we have till tribal? And they were like 30 minutes. And Carly goes, can we just go now since everyone has their mind made up? And Megan goes, I don't have my mind made up. I was like, what you mean you ain't got your mind made up? I could have accidentally got you voted out 3 or 4 rounds ago. What do you mean you don't have your mind made up? So then obviously I'm like, oh, great. Now I'm going to have to like. So then Carly's like, oh, are you open for conversation? And she's like, yeah. So then Carly goes talk to her. So I'm like, frick. I'm like, now I'm like, I got to, well, because Parker told us that it was the Norway. Megan had asked after he gave her the necklace, and he was like, "You'll find out at tribal." We were like, "Oh shoot, this is gonna be fun." But then he like came back and he's like, "No, he's like, I know, he's like, I need to tell you like for strategy purposes, like that's my bad."
Which I appreciate.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think we all did, and I'm sure Megan did too. I'm sure that would have just stressed her out even more, not knowing. Like obviously, I said I've never been in that position, winning the final tribal or final challenge. So like I don't know the stress it is into that, but yes, you can tell she was stressed. So Carly and her are talking. So I'm like, I ain't going out like this. I was like, I ain't about to. So I go straight to Todd. Todd was laying down with his buff over his eyes, and I was like, hey, I was like, can I talk to you for a second? And he's like, yeah, what's up? And I'm like, hey, I'm like, I was like, Megan, I was like, I'm sure you heard her. Megan said like, she's not like 100% on her decision yet. So like Carly's talking to her. Obviously, she's pitching me. Like all I would ask is that if Megan does vote for me, that you would still vote with me and vote for Carly. I was like, I don't remember if it revotes or not, but if it does, like that you would still vote for Carly again and let it go to fire. And he was like, what? And so I explained it to him again. I was like, I was like, they both might vote for me. I was like, 3 votes for Carly, it's 2-2. I was like, I don't remember if 3 votes, but if it does, it's just you and Megan. I was like, if she still votes Carly, you still vote, or she votes me, you still vote Carly. Me and Carly have to vote fire. I was like, and I was like, that way, like, if Carly beats me in fire, like, I can go out with my head held high. I would rather that than just getting voted out now. And he was like, dude, he's like, I respect that 100%. That you'd want to go out like that. He's like, 100%. I will give you that opportunity if it comes to that. And I was just like, whew. Just like, okay, good. So then, like, I didn't really feel like I had to like try to convince Megan as much. I'm trying to remember if me and Megan really talked a lot. Or yeah, we did. We went and talked, and she was just like, she was like, my concern is like, if I can beat you for Carly. She was like, just trying to figure out which one's better, like for me to take the end, have a better shot at beating. She was like, she was like, I do think you could be a very tough. She was like, you could be a tough person to beat. And I was just like, Carly's tougher. It's like, yeah, please. And then I heard Megan tell Carly that she would let her know about the vote. And this is this is actually really interesting because I don't think I've told anybody from the end this. I almost tried to flip this final three completely on its head. Um, as we're walking the tribal, obviously, like I'm nervous. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if I'm going to have to make fire. I see that they already have the fire making station set up just in case.
Had you practiced fire? Would you have been comfortable?
I would have been comfortable. I don't really practice fire much. I know how to do it. I've done it before in the game. I did it in Pirate for the first time. I had never practiced in my life, and I got it started actually fairly quickly. So I was comfortable doing it. I wasn't really sure what Carly's level of fire making skills were. I honestly feel like she may have been hiding that, and that she may have been actually really good at it because at Final Five, when we got to camp that night, we're making a fire. Obviously, Megan was kind of doing it. That was really her role. But Carly was like saying things like, "Oh, like don't we need to be doing this? Or don't we need to be doing that?" And I was just kind of like, "Oh, like she like actually knows a decent amount about like building the fire." I just don't know what her capabilities were as far as making it. I would have felt comfortable doing it. If I was going against Todd or Megan, probably not as comfortable. Just because I feel like they'd be faster than me, but I felt like in Carly, I may have had an advantage, or at least it would have been a more even battle. Yeah, so we're walking up tribal. I've got like, obviously my stomach's churning, so I'm like, I told Carly this when Todd and Megan had gone off to discuss, and it's just me and Carly. And Carly tells me, she's like, it's me, you have my vote in the end. And I was like, well, that's great for you. It's like, I have that for the tally. And then I told her, I was like, like saying you would have my vote if I go. And I told her, I was like, I guess if I go out here, like, I can like fulfill my dream of being Malcolm and get voted out at Final Four because I lost the last challenge. So we're walking up there. I haven't like Carly's still just like waiting to hear from Megan what she's doing. Megan's like, I'm not gonna lie to you, they're stringing along. And it's Megan, Carly, me, and then Todd was like further back, I think. And I was walking and I was like, if Todd and Megan are splitting their votes, me and Carly could easily vote Todd out right now.
The 2-1-1.
Yeah, and I went, it's like, that's interesting. That would be something else that I could be like, I shouldn't have had any control of this move, or I shouldn't necessarily have this much power to be able to make this happen. And I was like, do I pitch this to Carly? I was like, again, it kind of went back to that very first tribal council with pitching Josh or telling Josh that everyone's voting for him and lying to him. I tell Carly she can easily blow my spot up right there and tell Megan, and Todd, and then Todd's like, "What the hell?" Like, okay, I'm gonna vote you out now. So I was literally sitting there, we're waiting to go in, and I'm like back and forth in my mind. I'm also like waiting for Megan not to be like right there because I don't want to see her to see me and Carly whispering. If I'm like, hey, like, when you vote Todd, make this because we're still in the final three. So I'm sitting there, I'm contemplating like so fast on whether or not to do it. And I was starting to like, I think my hand was starting to come up to reach out and tap her on the shoulder. And Megan turns around and she goes, I told you I'd be honest with you. And she's like, I'm going to be voting for you. And I was just like, again, a weight off the shoulders. So my hand went right back down real quick. I'm not going to send Carly in top five. That would be good. And then we get in that final tribal, and they're it's very open. They're very transparent that we're going to vote Carly out. It's going to be the three of us in the end. Obviously, Carly's devastated, and Pete Parker's like, "Oh, how does that feel? Awesome! Like you're going to the final three," and I'm just like, "Feels fantastic." But yeah, so that was just a surreal moment. Also, feel like it was a testament to my social game that 2 times in a row I've made it to the end in Pirate, and we're the final 2. and you and Mello were both going to take it to the end. And I feel like I was going to beat
Was
both,
Miller
either
really
one
going
of
to
them.
vote me out and take you?
Yeah, I think he was. Because
Wow.
he told me he was going to take it to the end.
Okay.
Because me and him had a thing, because we had bonded about Lance. Because he was the first person I went to the place. And so, as far as I know, Mello was taking me. And then I was in this situation, which, granted, Carly could have maybe not wanted to take me. I think she would have, though. I'm not sure. Ask her, I guess. But yeah, so I mean, at that point, obviously, I'm not going to stir the pot and change things up. I know I'm going to the final three. I have a chance to plead my case, and I feel very confident in my game that I'm going to be able to pull it off.
So we're at the 3-hour, 35-minute mark. And so I am going to ask for a very, very expedited final tribal. And then I'm going to kind of wrap up with a couple of questions for you.
Don't worry. Final tribal counts is easy to wrap up because my final tribal was awful. God awful. We started off, my opening statement. I think part of it was we waited for so long down at that camp, like waiting for them to bring us up. And it got to the point where it was so late. Like I felt like I had a good speech, like everything I wanted to say in my head planned out. And then they're like, this is taking too long. We're going to take you all in. You're going to shower, change, because then you're going to do final tribal. Then we'll come inside and read the votes. And honestly, I feel like it kind of like threw me off because once I got inside, I shower, I clean up, and I'm just kind of like more so in a relaxed state. So we get to final tribal. I have to go first in my opening statement, and what a terrible opening statement it was. And I didn't say anything about my game. I'm just like, I feel like I played a great overall, like social, strategic, and physical game. I had to maneuver ups and downs, blah, blah, blah. And I didn't really explain anything. And so Megan goes next, and as soon as she starts talking, I was like, what was I doing? Like, you're so stupid, Austin. Like Megan's like stiff competition. Like, you've got to like be on top of this right now. So Megan goes, Todd goes. Josh asks a question. They just went through order. So Josh goes first with his question. I think he started with Todd, then Megan, then me. And like even his question, it was terrible. And like Josh even told me after, he's like, and I even thought it while I was talking. Like I talked way too long. I just like rambled, and I felt like I was trying to make up for what I didn't say in my opening statement. And also even with Adam's question, I feel like I was doing that a little bit where I was kind of like backpedaling, trying to like make up for things I didn't say in my opening statement that I should have. And then after that, like moving forward, I felt like I was much more like calm, like said the things I needed to say. As I was talking, I saw people like Carlos sitting in the back, like nodding his head, like, okay, yeah, like that's true. That's a really good point. So then like that kind of gave me confidence. Amber came up and like I felt really good about what she said. She gave me a great question to be able to really show my game off to the jury. Luckily, I didn't blow that one. I was not expecting the emotions from Tony when he came up because he was one that I was like, I really don't know where he's going to stand on, like who he's voting for, but I knew he was a crucial vote for me. I had lost that final three advantage, and I was under the assumption that it was just an extra vote. So my biggest fear was that final three being a tie between a 5-5 tie between me and Megan, and obviously the Todd cast the votes, and I know that 100% he's voting Megan. So like I knew I needed to get just knock the rest of my stuff out of the park. Obviously the emotions from Tony. And when he asked if he could give me a hug, I didn't know if I was allowed to or not, but I was just like,
sure.
I guess they'll tell me to sit down if I can, so I just got up and gave him a hug. But I really appreciated that from him. And he sent me some messages after the game about some things too that I really appreciated. So I love you, Tony. There's no hard feelings. And I know we've talked about that since the game ended. And then my closing statement, I got to go last. I said it. I was getting emotional during the final tribal, and I've always said I cannot stand it when people cry in Survivor, whether it's the real thing or games. But I definitely was a bit more emotional this time. I guess I'm growing soft in my old age of 28. And then, so the jury goes to vote. Had to do one last pee while everyone's voting ritual. It's my good luck charm throughout the season. So we finish, and they're like, all right, we're going to go directly inside and read the votes. So at that point, I was like, okay, it's probably not a tie.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like he would have done like a Ghost Island type thing if it was a tie. Um, and it's like they let the jury like come up and hug us. So obviously we're giving the jury hugs and stuff. And Amber gives me a hug, and she goes, "I fought for you so hard, but I just don't think you have the votes. I'm so sorry." So now I'm going inside like, great, I just freaking lost. So now I'm just like, I'm like not the happiest person in the world. So we go inside, and I went and changed shirts and shorts. I wanted to look nicer at the vote reveal. And then, yeah, so Parker starts pulling out the votes, and it's Megan, Austin, Megan, Austin, Megan, Austin. And I'm just like, oh my God. And like at that point, I think me and Megan both knew that whatever name he pulled out next was probably going to be the winner. So I'm just like, oh, here we go. And he pulls out and he says Austin, and I was just like, ooh, I was like, oh boy. I said, here we go. So you better say my name one more time, Parker. And then obviously he pulled it out and said my name, the winner. And so that was just a very emotional moment for me because I was like, I was trying so hard not to cry. And like, I didn't want to like get up and celebrate like too much, but I knew I just had to let something out. So that's why I just kind of like covered my face at first and then had to stand up and like just let us scream out of like, let go. And yeah, so that was great. I've definitely watched that video back several times.
So I normally kind of end with a series of questions, but given where we are, I'm just going to ask kind of one final question. What does your win mean to you?
It means everything. Yeah, it means a lot because just kind of validating everything, making the changes in my game. Oh fuck! Here we go again. I'm not doing this. No, it means the world to me. After having my flop in survival challenge, I was like, maybe I'm not as good as I thought I was after pirate. I just kind of got lucky in that situation, got dealt the right cards. Obviously like buying the letter of marque with fire tokens was a big thing that I just had. I had way more of those than everybody else. So that's what saved me. And then I was just kind of able to I literally played the middle the entire time to merge and never really had to pick a side. It felt like a pirate. So I was like, I flopped in survival, or felt like I flopped in survival challenge, getting 12. So it was like, maybe you're not as good as you thought you were. Maybe you're a fluke winner. So yeah, just coming in and like making the changes I wanted to make, being confident in my game, and yeah, it feels good. So now I'm 2 for 4, got a 50% win rate. So maybe it's time to hang up the torch. Or I say that now, but I know I told Parker, I said if you do Winners at War, I said give me a call and I'll come back. Frank mentioned Apex to me. I think that one would be very appealing, just based off the way he's talked about it. But I've only ever played Survivor games, so maybe I move on to a Big Brother challenge style game. But I think at least for a while, I think at least for a while, I'm done with the Survivor games unless it's the real thing comes calling.
Well, Austin, I just want to say thank you for walking through your entire game with me. This was really amazing to hear. I was so happy to see you pull off the victory. I was really rooting for you. And yeah, again, congratulations.
Thank you, Steven. Thanks for doing this with us. I know I feel bad I went this long. I made a joke in our chat today in the Reelfoot alumni or Reelfoot season group chat, like, I guess I have to go 4 hours tonight. Or I said 3 plus.
Let me know.
Louis from Survival Challenge.
You're not allowed to pass Austin. You're not allowed to surpass this time. I will not let it happen.
345? Can we get to 345? Hit me with some of those random questions you hit.
All right. You just got to say first thing that comes to your head. Ready?
Yeah.
Who still has unfinished business from Wilson Hill?
Wilson Hill. Ooh, William. I would love to see him get another shot.
Unfinished business from this season?
Josh and Lydia.
Favorite challenge?
The endurance one with the things, just because proving to myself that I could do one like that for that long.
Favorite camp life moment?
Ooh, favorite camp life moments. I guess keeping everybody awake with my snoring, even though I didn't experience it myself.
Lowest moment?
Lowest moment, Skylar getting voted out because of me.
Highest moment?
Winning.
Who do you wish you had a chance to work with but didn't?
Sharif, just that it could have worked out. Also Lydia, I think that would have been a lot of fun to work with her.
Who surprised you the most out there?
Carly and Tony, for two different reasons, but Carly and Tony.
Shot in the dark, love it or hate it?
I love it. I've never loved it more.
Well,
just call me Jeff Probst when it comes to love and shot in the dark.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Thank you for people who have stayed with us through this 3-hour and 45-minute odyssey. This is the third Reelfoot interview. There will be more to come. None will surpass this in length. I can guarantee it. Once again, congratulations, Austin, and take care, everyone.
Thank you.